Fortaleza have two of Brazil's top young strikers. There's just one problem. They hate each other. Juliano Mateus is a tall athletic striker with a nose for goal. At age 15, he was a star man for the Fortaleza under-20s. Son of former Olympian, now renowned businessman Robert Mateus, Juliano had any advantage you could think of and was well recognized across the country, although his striker partner was on the rise. Leo and Juliano is the name and Embarrassing Fools is his favorite game. That's really your tagline? A relative unknown outside the Serra region, he was discovered years ago in futsal halls and played for Fortaleza's youth since he was 12. His background isn't too dissimilar to many great Brazilians of the past, yet it was a different world compared to the Mateuses. Off the field, the two never got along, each growing resentment for one another. On the pitch, Leo was considered the more talented footballer, while Juliano had the genetics of an elite athlete. Both had things distinctive to them. However, they both had the same ambition, wear the number 9 for Brazil and lift the World Cup. The first step is becoming Fortaleza's senior team striker, and unlike the youth team, there was only one spot available. The fight began in the local under-20 league, and their debut match set the tone. Leo grabbed a hat-trick before halftime, but Juliano scored 6 in a 10-1 victory. Even with their rivalry, the two dominated the Sarense Sub-20 thanks to Bernardino's 4-4-2 formation. The coach was in his early days, but seeing the pair's lack of camaraderie wouldn't stop them from excelling. Juliano played as the big man who constantly made dangerous runs. While his technique was lacking, his finishing and work rate couldn't be matched. Just don't ask him to switch the play. Leo finds great chances for himself with his dribbling and flair, but he plays a deeper role as he can connect between the midfield and attack, resulting in a lot of chances for his partner. Juliano grabbed the most attention with 38 goals and 9 assists in 27 appearances. That, along with stronger PR, overshadowed Leo's contributions. Still, more eyeballs were paying attention to the pair. Journalists and pundits were asking, are they the real deal? Or is the Serra region weak? There were additional competitions to quiet those questions. Firstly, it was the Campeonato Brasileiro Sub-20 where the best youth teams in Brazil participated. It was separated into two groups. Fortaleza were in Group A, which had some of the strongest youth academies in the country. That included Santos, Palmeiras, Corinthians, and Fluminense. Beginning with Goiás, Leo opened the campaign thanks to Mateus' header. Unfortunately, their side conceded an equalizer at the death. Not much would separate these clubs in the early stages. Down 1-0 versus Santos, Leo's equalizer rallied the boys, which consequently forced an own goal for the victory. That couldn't be said against Atlético Paranaense, where the first loss arrived. They would rebound against Cuiabá, where Leo would grab a hat-trick and Mateus found a brace himself. Following, another victory arrived with Red Bull Brazil. The momentum carried on, with an early penalty from Mateus securing a massive victory over Fluminense. Then, Leo would grab his second hat-trick of the competition as Vasco da Gama were sunk. Next, in the penultimate group game, Palmeiras were defeated with Juliano finding the open space. Unfortunately, it didn't end well, with a massive loss to Corinthians. Throughout this, Leo had the higher highs, getting his goals in bunches, but Juliano became more consistent with his scoring in the last 5 matches. They finished on top of the group, meaning Cruzeiro, who finished 4th in Group B, would be their opponents. That occurred 2 months after the conclusion of the previous stage, but a problem arrived by that point. Both missed the first leg. Juliano was given an opportunity to play for the Brazilian national youth team, and Leo fractured his ribs by lifting too much weight. Yet, 42,000 fans came and watched as they were still able to win at home 2-0. Although, if they had their 2 stars, maybe it would have been a blowout. Good news for them, Leo was back for the second leg. Granted, his ribs were taped up, so he clearly wasn't at 100%. Plus, the lack of chemistry with temporary striker Daniel led to a frustrating encounter in Belo Horizonte. The opponent scored twice in the first half to equalize the aggregate. That all led to a penalty shootout where Leo opened it up. Both sides would miss a pen prior to the 6th round. 4-4 and sudden death, the 6th shooter for Fortaleza was Michel Cavalcante. He shot it over the brick wall and we're still looking for the ball. Murilo on Cruzeiro's side was calmer and sent them to the next round. A huge disappointment as Group A's best side. Despite Leo finishing as the second top scorer in the competition, without Juliano, the job wasn't done. By the end, America Futebol Clube would win against Internacional. This brought a slight loss of confidence for Leo, as when Juliano returned, he scored 4 in a friendly win past Potiguar de Mosoro reserves, while Leo got none. Then in the penultimate Sarense fixture, Leo grabbed 3, but Juliano slaughtered in 6 in a 14-0 victory. This form, however, would be beneficial for the U20 Copa do Brasil, a competition with 32 of Brazil's best youth academies. They were drawn with Cruzeiro at home. The rematch, this time with Juliano. And over 40,000 less fans than the previous encounter. No Daniel, no party. Back to Juliano, he was a game changer, as his physicality became difficult to deal with. He grabbed 2, seeing Fortaleza move on. Now the second round has changed to a two-legged affair, where they faced Grêmio. Prior to this, the Fortaleza youth claimed a perfect record in the Sarense League, but Grêmio were a whole different beast. Neither of the strikers had a good match. Leo was especially poor, as Grêmio smashed Fortaleza 3-0. That continued into the home tie, where nothing was mustered. Leo was getting shut down again, and with Juan Riquelme receiving a second yellow in the 66th minute, hope was all lost. Hope was all lost, except from Juliano. That 74th minute goal brought the energy, and less than 10 minutes later, he was found again for another brilliant header. In spite of the setback, they had a chance. Unfortunately, the tired legs of Fortaleza couldn't provide anything else, as they were eliminated and their season was over. Grêmio went on to lose in the semis to eventual winners, Corinthians. Focusing on the senior squad, at this point, they had lost 5 out of their last 6 games. With 7 matches remaining and the unlikelihood of losing their Copa Sudamericana spot, the teenagers were brought in to the senior team. What's the worst that will happen? Losing more games? Yes. Leo would get some game time, but it would be Juliano who would break the record for the youngest goal scorer in the club's history. The PR is unmatched. Regardless, any club with 2 attackers like these, let alone 1, should be thrilled. But that brought back a previously mentioned issue. It was all well and good using 2 strikers in the youth leagues. Unlike Bernardino though, the manager for the senior squad only used 1 striker. Sure, maybe you could mold one of them into a left or right winger, but a manager whose job is on the line would rather not risk starting a pair of 16-year-olds. Plus, you'd also make an unhappy player, as one would be seeing the other play their desired position. Still, it's clear both were too good for the youth league, yet somebody's development was going to get blocked. A conundrum. But it was a conundrum solved much easily with an external opinion. Rumors were being discussed in the dressing room, including a meeting between Robert Mateus and the president. One teammate wondered if better training facilities were incoming and asked Juliano about it.
Eu não sei o que esse velho faz no seu tempo livre.
Rumors continued to circulate among the dressing room as the end of the season approached. Fortaleza would finish in 9th, which meant qualification for continental football. Everyone was packing up before the very short break in the Brazilian calendar. However, before leaving, Leo got noted that he was wanted by the director of football. Nothing out of the ordinary, especially with his youth contract ending on New Year's. When he walked in though, it wasn't just him. The coach wasn't there, but the president was, along with Robert Mateus. A somber look was on the director, while a smug one on Robert. Contract discussions came up, but when he said he was sorry about this, Leo thought he was going back to the under-20s. Instead, the director said that we made several decisions that's best for the club, and unfortunately, that results in not extending your contract. Before Leo could even get his thoughts together, the director wished him the best in his future. Leo snapped, which led to heated exchanges. Exiting the office in near rage, trying to process everything, he headed for the exit, where he saw Juliano.
Boa sorte.
If you were him, what would you do? Clock that guy in the face. Released from his local club, Leo Anitez's search for a new team proved tricky. Despite what he did at youth level, Leo Anitez's reputation barely reached outside the local spheres. Although, the people who were reporting about it may have been getting fed alternative opinions. Sure, he has growing to do, but the guy is 16. There are literal adults writing a hit piece like this. Additionally, it might not help that his agent Ruben Pequeno has pissed off half the managers in the Brasileiro Serie A. That led to a longer period without a contract, which meant he had to keep himself fit. To do that, he needed to participate in Várzea tournaments. What is a Várzea? According to Rafinha, it's like a network of independent matches and tournaments organized by the local community. You play on clay, burning heat, dust, and sand. The players are the rejects. They play with anger, they play to survive, play like their lives depend on it. People in Brazil know what Várzeas are, but you have to play in it to understand what it's really like. Leo didn't play in these tournaments for too long, but the experiences were invaluable, and sometimes a little crazy. He was lucky that after a couple of weeks, offers were received. His destination will be further north of Fortaleza Esporte Clube, north via a 13-minute drive. Not like Leo has a license, but his new club will be Serra Sporting Clube, the fierce rivals of his former. Controversial? Potentially to whatever former fans he had. But do you expect a 16-year-old to move across the country? Or to Mexico where Atletico San Luis knew about him? With the number 9 spot open, let's learn about his new team. Serra Sporting Clube were founded in 1914 with nicknames including Vozio, meaning Big Grandpa, Vovô, meaning grandpa, and O Mais Querido, meaning dearest. Vovô also is their mascot. Despite many years of the 21st century in the second tier, they have played in the top flight. The rivalry between them and Fortaleza is known as the Clásico Rei and has been contested over 600 times. For Leo, getting one over his former club, now rivals, added another layer to this move. That objective could be done in the State League. The State Leagues have a significant history in Brazil, as they were the first professional leagues. Back in the early 1900s, due to the country's large landmass, it made sense geographically and economically to play teams from your own state. Some of the biggest rivalries in Brazil are only as massive due to these. Unfortunately, the importance of these has decreased due to the national championship. For a lot of clubs though, this is the most important competition. Serra's is the Campeonato Serrense, which they won last season. That gave them one more trophy than their rivals. Conveniently, they would face off soon, as they were in the same group. Huh? They don't play each other? So how it goes is that these 10 are split into 2 groups, and you play all the clubs in the opposite group. First place advances you to the semi-final, and second to third on both sides face off in a quarter-final playoff. The winners face first place. The Rei rivals were both dominant. However, Juliano Mateus was on another level. The man grabbed 10 in the stage, including a 79th minute winner versus Atletico Cearense. Serra could only muster a draw with the same opponents, meaning Fortaleza were off to the semis. Luckily, the quarters were straightforward, with a 3-0 victory over Caucaie. In the semis, it would be the Clásico Rei. Leo returns to Fortaleza's stadium. Wait, they both play in the same stadium? And Juliano was rested! I guess you don't want to overwork a 16-year-old like other places. Regardless, it was a big day for Leo against his former team. While he saw familiar faces, including those in the meeting who he avoided eye contact with, none of the guys from the U20s were present, except for one man, his former coach, Bernardino. Leo respected him as the trainer got a lot out of him, even in a role he felt he wasn't the strongest in. They had a chat, such as how things were at the new club. He also asked Leo about a few players. Since Bernardino is still the U20 manager of Fortaleza, he's managed against Serra's youth. In contrast to last year, Serra had a few guys looking promising. Leo mentioned a few, including the fullbacks of Carlos Wilson and Arnaldo. Both already made appearances for the senior squad, although weren't quite ready to consistently start. Bernardino then asked about Bruninho. Leo had no clue who that was. Bruh. Leo didn't have too much time to talk, but had to know one last thing. Was Bernardino aware about his release beforehand and why it happened? He said he was stunned since he expected the two of them to share playing time during the regional competitions, with the one doing better earning the starting spot. When Leo went into more detail about the meeting, Bernardino's eyebrow raised when he heard Juliano's father being present. His influence kept growing at the club, and thanks to him, the club received more funding for their facilities. However, that idea of him at the meeting left a bad taste in his mouth. Or maybe that was the coffee. You know what? The training facilities are good enough. Upgrade that damn coffee machine. The two departed as Leo got ready for his return. The reception for him was mixed, as it would be joining a crosstown rival. Nevertheless, he was ready for the next part of his career, and while it wasn't the matchup fans were hoping for, it was a glorious opportunity to make a final. Serra seemed dominant, but despite missing Juliano and his 10 goals in the competition, Fortaleza opened it up 24 minutes in. Chances continued to be exchanged into the second half, and yes, things were looking difficult for the Vovos, but Leo would eventually get his first good effort on net. Still, the deficit remained until there was 10 to go. A long ball to Guilherme Caxil was nodded into the path of Leo as he equalized the match. Would he celebrate? Of course he did. Let's explain an additional rule to this competition. By this point, the home team, who finished in first place, would have the advantage if it ends in a draw. So, as of now, Fortaleza would advance, but it wouldn't matter. Serra were opening themselves up and got countered, seeing Fortaleza find the official winner late. A disappointing result for Leo and the squad, as Fortaleza would go on and easily win the 2024 Sarense Serie A. The two, though, would see each other again a week later. The Copa do Nordeste is a regional cup competition which Serra and Fortaleza participated in. Informally, it's sometimes referred to as the Lampions League in reference to UEFA's competition. That's the least confusing part. In fact, I'll just leave all this info on the screen if you're interested to learn more. In the Copa do Nordeste, we would see the teenagers face off for the first time. Juliano Mateus started, Leo Anites was rested. He did just play a few days prior in the Copa do Brasil. In Juliano's appearance in the Clásico Rei, he would score and his side would win again. Fortaleza once again advanced to a final where they faced Bahia over 2 legs. Playing across a span of 2 days? Why would anybody want to manage in this country? They also had the Copa Sudamericana the day before. Pedri thinks he had it bad. Bahia had an extra day of rest in comparison, and that tiny advantage would benefit them in the end, as they won the tie 4-3, lifting the trophy in front of their home fans. With Leo and Juliano yet to face off, it was like a mysterious puppeteer swayed things to make sure this encounter never happened. However, fate cannot be avoided forever, as their clubs faced off in the Copa do Brasil over 2 legs. And with a significant break prior, we would finally get to see the teenagers face off for the very first time. It actually happened, let's go! In the tunnel, they gave each other a certain look, but were professional enough for a handshake. Juliano would have the first chance out of the two, but it was a difficult header. As expected, Fortaleza looked stronger heading into the half. Leo was relatively quiet, and its rival was not. Serra would gain possession, only to give it away, allowing Juliano a glorious opportunity, yet he was stopped from point blank. If Fortaleza can't do it the easy way though, why not have this done? Mess up 2 free kicks. Then have Mateus Justo take over and do this. Serra's Jean Carlos nearly did it too. With another woodwork hit later, it didn't seem to be the Vovos' day. Following in the 80th minute, Juliano would play his teammates in behind, but his rare playmaking ability was wasted. Fortaleza would rue that miss, as a few minutes later, a free kick was won by the visiting side. Guilherme Caxil stepped up to take it, and his far post delivery was founded by Leo. Unbelievable scenes, as this cup tie was level. Nothing else occurred, as in the first meeting between the teenagers, Leo earned the man of the match. Juliano didn't score, but had a promising game. Advantage though, goes to Leo Anites. As the second leg arrived a week later, Juliano didn't appear. In Leo's first Clásico Rei in front of the Bozil crowd, the home side would absolutely obliterate the Leão do PC. 5-0 by half time. Juliano was seen sitting in the box seats as the counter kept going back from him and Leo. However, respect to Jean Carlos, who put on a show to remember. If Leo equipped rated performances for Brazilian Cup matches, he would grab a perfect 10. The media were stunned, and Leo's new team became a side to watch over the course of the Brazilian calendar. Both sides gained something from these encounters, but how they'll look when they meet again is a question for another day. Jose Macia, known as Pepe, was part of the legendary Brazilian squads that won the 58 and 62 World Cups. He was also part of the Santos side that traveled across the world. He once joked that he was the greatest Santos striker on the planet because Pelé was from Saturn. He stayed at Santos for his entire career, but despite having 2 World Cup medals, he never actually participated in the tournament due to injuries. What does this guy have to do with our story? Well, apparently, they were labeling Leo and Juliano as the next Pepe. Juliano Mateus got the label of the next Adriano. For many reasons, I think these guys are hoping certain part of their careers don't interline with theirs. At their respective clubs, both had an objective to cement that number 9 spot, and did so by earning that number on the back of their shirts. After defeating Juliano Mateus' Fortaleza in the Copa do Brasil, Leo's next aim was to meet them again next season in Brazil's top flight. Ceará haven't been there since their 2022 relegation, and it wasn't a simple task. 4 places were up for grabs, but the sides relegated from the Serie A were damn good. Yet, with Leo and Juliano improving rapidly, Ceará were off to a cold start? 3 losses in the opening 4 is no way to get promoted. The only positive for Leo is he scored 3 times, but they haven't played any tough opposition and wouldn't do so until they got through May. They needed to pick up results now or kiss goodbye to promotion not even halfway through the campaign. Thankfully, the team improved, winning 4 straight fixtures. The highlight being Leo and Juliano's hat-trick versus São Bernardo. 5 goals in the month for the kid resulted in 5 dubs in the league, advancing them just outside the promotion places. Also, Leo's currently the top scorer. On the level up, Fortaleza were struggling. Since that 5-0 beatdown from their rivals, they didn't win a single match in the league, scoring once in 5. The Copa Sudamericana stuffed their schedule, and results for that weren't much better. With Mateus' last goal on April 25th, that saw them sit in the relegation zone. Returning north, Leo brought the heat with a brace versus Grêmio Novo Horizontino. Then arrived some tough fixtures, and in turn, a drop of form. Inexcusable losses like against Volta Redonda FC at home. There was also Bahia, Curitiba, and Atlético Paranaense causing difficulties. Worst of all, Curitiba saw Leo subbed off due to a torn hamstring. This caused him to miss a couple months, including the Copa do Brasil quarters. We'll return to Ceará when he is up and running. Fortaleza increased their output, won their Copa Sudamericana group, but were losing more often than not. It wasn't helped with Juliano still not scoring in the league since his opening day brace. You can dominate the youth leagues, but maybe this was too big of a step for the 16-year-old. Or maybe everybody should be patient. Results somewhat improved across the Brazilian winter months. For Juliano, Avaí was the highlight. It was his 8th start of the Brasileiro, as he wasn't selected for every game. Yet, nearly 3 months had passed since his last league goal. That would change thanks to an error by Wellington. It wasn't enough for a win, but his confidence seemed to be returning. 2 match days later versus Cruzeiro, Juliano was allowed to take a penalty to continue his form. A goal is a goal, and with his team winning, it should be fine. However, a clown named João Paulo was flustering the youngster throughout the encounter. Realistically, the kid should ignore him. Yep, that's not what Juliano did, as he instead 2-footed the lad, seeing himself sent to the showers. The fans began wondering if maybe they needed to buy a new striker or play others out of position to ease the pressure. They've been doing the latter to an extent already, but instead, the coach kept playing him whenever he was fit. Thanks to the amount of midweek fixtures, that wouldn't be every single match. Nevertheless, rumors began to swirl on why as a 16-year-old, he was out there so often. We know about the relation of these training facilities and his dad already, so it's fair to assume nepotism was at play, according to some frustrated fans. Whether true or not, these reports are unavoidable, especially when they scored twice in 5 Serie A fixtures, nearly got eliminated from the Copa Sudamericana to Delfim of Ecuador, and would get knocked out by Defensa y Justicia. Meanwhile, Leo was still recovering from his injury, but if we shift back to the beginning of July, Ceará had the Copa do Brasil quarters versus Bahia, a fellow promotion rival and the team that defeated Fortaleza in the Copa do Nordeste. Their attackers Ignacio Ramirez Ramirez and Raniel were lighting it up in the Serie B. With a 10-match undefeated run and 1 loss in the campaign overall, they defeated a strong Fluminense side to get here. So it was going to be a massive challenge for the Vozil, especially with a 1-0 deficit. Serra lost the first leg thanks to Luis Otavio's clumsy error. Although they were lucky the margin wasn't wider. Still, they had a chance to overcome the deficit a week later at home. Yeah, they did lose 5-0 on the weekend, but that's because they were looking forward to this match. Leo was pumped, but jealous at the same time. Maybe we'll see him for the semi-final, if they got through. Why the doubt though? The team has done it in big moments before, plus Leo's Paulo Carlos Wilson was starting. Things look promising, as in the 20th minute, a deflected shot led to Igor being pushed in the frenzy, meaning Serra could equalize the tie from the spot. Bisoli was stepping up, and Leo knew he would score. He's been learning how to take pens from him, and he's never missed one in training or in a game. He got stopped. In the second half, Bahia would themselves win a penalty, which saw Raniel tuck it home. Serra were eliminated, while Bahia went on to defeat Santos in the semis and face Flamengo in the final. In that final, they fought hard until the end, but it wasn't enough. In late August, Fortaleza had 2 tricky away games, Cuiabá and Avalle. First up, the former, a corner, was given early on. From it, Juliano Mateus would leap and connect with the opener. That led to a 2-1 victory, and it got better at Avalle. He's got the physical traits, so watch him take advantage of them. With a brace earned following the half, he'd be allowed to score his 3rd off a penalty. That, along with an assist, gave him a match to remember. At around the same time, Leo was returning from injury for Serra. After elimination from the Copa do Brasil to Bahia, his club would win 5-7 and continued the form when he returned to the pitch. While his return was less than spectacular, in the very next match versus Londrina, he'd score his first goal since his injury. With them in a great position for promotion with 9 matches remaining, would they be able to clinch it? Fortaleza, meanwhile, were occupying the final Copa Sudamericana spot with 10 fixtures remaining. Plus, Juliano was sparkling, nabbing a hat-trick versus Sao Paulo. That continued with a 10th-minute goal against Goiás. They would end up conceding 5 in the first half. With neither teenager called up for any Brazil youth side for the international break, they were able to continue training with their clubs for the season's conclusion. For Serra, it was back and forth with wins and losses, making promotion look tight with 4 fixtures to go. Fortaleza, on the other hand, maintained their spot for the Copa Sudamericana, but only by a single point. They resumed their bad run with a single goal in October. At least 3 of the remaining 5 fixtures were against teams below them. However, when your form stinks, it doesn't matter who you play, because they genuinely went on an atrocious run. 1 win in the last 9 fixtures. 1. Plus, the momentum Juliano had didn't last long, as he exclusively scored from the spot. That meant no continental football for Fortaleza. A positive is that there will be less games to worry about next season, but an absolute miserable campaign for the fans. Despite the negativity surrounding the club, Juliano ended the Brasileiro Serie A with 14 goals as a 16-year-old. Fans and pundits may have been too harsh on him. Granted, a lot were pens. Juliano was very thankful to his teammates, who helped him get through a tough debut season in senior football, a gesture the veterans appreciated. What about Leo and Serra? Will they return to the top flight? Playing 3 of the promotion favorites, they drew Coritiba and Atlético Paranaense while defeating Brusque. The latter saw a pair of braces, which included Leo, of course, and another from right back Arnaldo. Losing to Grêmio on the final match day didn't do damage because both went up. They can thank Grêmio Novo Horizontino for failing to get a result, seeing Serra claim 4th place. It was tight, but the club had to feel they struck gold with Leo Anites. 20 matches played, and he grabbed 17. Who knows how difficult the jump to the top flight will be, but what's certain is the upcoming Leo Anites versus Juliano debates. In the news following the season, it was learned that Santos signed a new striker, and that striker was Juliano Mateus. It It seemed that it was going to be an eventful season between the rivals, but a transfer out of nowhere left Fortaleza fans devastated. Seeing two players with 62 goals together in the under-20s to 2 years later with neither at your club, especially when one of them finished second in scoring. Serra were on fire in their return to the Serie A, being as high as 5th place 15 matches through. Unfortunately, they would have a bit of a downfall. However, they were giving their youth a chance, like Arnaldo. Granted, 28 starts to an 18-year-old left back will cause some holes to be showcased. Nevertheless, Leo and Juliano shined in his top flight debut. 19 goals got all of Europe scouting him. It was unfortunate that he and Serra couldn't keep up the great start, as they barely avoided relegation, surviving by 3 points and finishing level with their rivals. What grabbed people's attention though was outscoring Juliano Mateus by 9. Yeah, he started more games, but I don't think the Santos man was matching him in that 6 fixture gap. Unfortunately, they didn't get to face off on the pitch. Later, he would go on and score a brace in his knockout debut in the Copa Libertadores. Santos ended in second, but with a strong squad and Mateus improving, the question is, could they end their 20-year-plus drought? While Juliano would stay another year in Brazil, Leo Anites turned 18 and was ready to test himself with the elite. Many advised him to stay, especially with a young team that was only getting better. In his mind, he wants to become Brazil's number 9, and the best option to do that would be at Chelsea. Wait, are you sure, Leo? After missing out on Endrick, Chelsea vowed to themselves to not miss out on top Brazilian wonder kids, for better or for worse. Despite already having a lot of attackers, they had Unai Emery, who utilized the 4-2-2. Like Bernardino and Zé Ricardo before him, Unai Emery was seemingly the right manager for Leo. It was a risky transfer based on Chelsea's history, but he felt a move to Europe was necessary for a future call-up to the Brazilian national team, especially with the World Cup around the corner. It was tough to say goodbye to his Serra colleagues, especially since this was the club that gave him a chance when he seemed ostracized. They are in safe hands though. Unfortunately, a move to Chelsea alone wouldn't be enough to make the World Cup squad. Coach Marcao believed experience was key, so Leo's showcases at Chelsea didn't earn him any looks. That all resulted in a round of 16 defeat to France, where the Seleção's victories were against Suriname and New Zealand. A lot was beginning to shuffle in Brazil, and that was also the case for its number 1 prospect. Juliano Mateus' first campaign at Santos didn't go swimmingly, but this year, he got a full preseason, and no matter what competition it was, he would be scoring. Since 2012, the club's notable successes were in the regional leagues, which to be fair is a difficult one. However, no Brasileiro, Libertadores, or Copa do Brasil since the Neymar days. The league title was a significant slump, as the last time they lifted it was in 2004. The club of Pelé, who was considered the best in Brazil, wasn't that for a few decades. They've been close though, and Juliano Mateus started off hot to begin the campaign. Unfortunately, not getting called up to the national team devastated him, severely affecting his form. While the tournament was going on in June, he wouldn't score once until late July, which to be fair was a massive brace against Atlético Paranaense. Santos were undefeated during this run and were becoming impossible to catch up to. In the other competitions, there were more challenges. In the Copa do Brasil, it's never easy. Even Série D side Brasiliense, who has the greatest badge in the country by the way. If it wasn't for João Victor's 78th minute goal in the second leg, this could have gone to penalties. Palmeiras in the 4th round was tight as well. Losing the first leg away, they were able to match the score in the second and win on pens. The quarters versus Botafogo weren't simple either, but a pair of 2-1 wins sent Santos to the semi-final. In the semis, they would face Red Bull Brazil. Obviously not their actual name, Juliano Mateus would score 3 across the 2 legs, setting Santos to their first Copa do Brasil final since 2015. On that day, it finished 2-2 on aggregate, which was rescued late by Santos. All of that only to lose on pens. It was Palmeiras then. This time, they faced Cruzeiro. With the first leg away, it seemed that the home side were dominating. Yet, against the run of play, Juliano Mateus stunned the crowd. Cruzeiro remained calm, however, keeping up the opening pressure and did enough to equalize prior to the half. If it wasn't for Santos keeper João Pedro, along with huge blocks on the post, this should have been uglier. Santos were seemingly getting away with a draw, but in the 92nd minute, Nathan gave the ball away cheaply, allowing Gabriel Menino to send the ball behind the defender to Junior, who placed it in. An unwanted disadvantage, yet the second leg would be hosted by Santos, and an early corner was nodded in by Artur Chavez. The score stayed unchanged until the latter end of the match. Another corner and another chance. Yet, this delivery will be interfered with by Hercules, whose shove forced the ref to point to the spot. There was one man who was trusted with this glorious opportunity, and that was Juliano Mateus. The potential game decider on his foot, he would smash it in. Celebrations were jubilant, but off the restart, Santos won the ball back but became too cute with it. That allowed Cruzeiro space to shoot, and Nathan, who was everywhere, would put his body in front of the ball, deflecting it into his own net. So like in 2015, Santos' fate was obstructed by pens. Unfortunately for Juliano, he was subbed off prior, so he could only watch. Despite the stakes, both sides remained composed, as the keepers were stopping nothing. 5 players through, 5-5. 7 shooters, never in doubt. On to the 9th, Ezequiel Fernandez sent the keeper the wrong way, while Anderson Jesus hit it into the side netting. Now, it was the final shooters before the keepers, and Sequeira was able to give Santos yet another advantage. Hercules on Cruzeiro's end wouldn't show incredible strength, as Santos won the Copa do Brasil, their first trophy in almost 15 years, and Juliano Mateus' 6 goals in the competition proved to be vital. It wasn't all sunshine and roses though, as Botafogo, who Santos eliminated in the Copa do Brasil quarters, met again in the Libertadores quarters, and it wouldn't be as nice. An opening leg loss of 4-0 had their fate signed off. Juliano wouldn't match Neymar in securing that trophy, but he was on his way to do something Brazil's historic cap leader couldn't: win the Brasileirão with Santos. From August to the end of the campaign, Santos would only lose thrice, winning every other fixture. That included 14 goals from Juliano, which helped them lift the trophy and earn him the top scorer award. Still not even age 19, he managed 24 in 28 matches. Many Brazilians were hailing him as the future number 9 of the Seleção. And sure, not everyone liked him, but the general fan had to admit that this guy had it. The award list was lengthy, which included a spot in the team of the season along with a couple of his colleagues. That included 19-year-old Clemerson Bocaiúva, who similarly to Juliano had Europe on his radar. Overall, Juliano played 55 matches in all competitions, scoring 47. Combining the Brazilian-related fixtures, in 3 years, he ended with 100 goals. Interest was high in him, and in January of 2027, he was ready to move to Europe. Leo was having a solid time with Chelsea, receiving quite a few starts. 8 goal contributions through 17 appearances was not awful for the now 19-year-old. However, his spot wasn't always safe, especially when Todd Boehly thought of the great idea of bringing back Kai Havertz. Luckily, Nicholas Jackson would be loaned out in January to United. Leo was seemingly getting the full trust from the coaching staff and the board. Plus, in a couple months, he'd earned his first international call-up with the Seleção in a friendly versus South Korea, in which he scored. Everything was looking bright for the kid.
Rumors are circulating that Chelsea have finalized the deal for a new attacker.
Here we go. There is an agreement in principle. Chelsea
Would like to announce the transfer of Juliano Mateus. You missed out on one Brazilian wonder kid, and now you keep going for all of them. Chelsea signing Juliano Mateus caused a frenzy in Brazil, as many youngsters who moved there barely stepped onto Stamford Bridge. With Leo though, they saw he was receiving playing time, which brought comfort. The excitement heightened after the re-emergence of them playing at the youth level together, although the reasoning of why that stopped never reached a wider audience. When rumors of this transfer arose, Leo requested a meeting with the coach and upstairs staff. Trying to keep calm, he questioned why another attacker was being signed. Todd Boehly suggested, what's better than one Brazilian? 2. Why wouldn't a club take a chance on the country's top scorer, said some other guy. Plus, you played together. Lastly, Unai Emery believed the two up front would provide joy to millions. Nice looking on the bright side in life. But Leo expressed a great displeasure about this and stormed out of the room. At this moment, he wouldn't consider extending his contract with the Blues. With him arriving following the extinction of Chelsea's 8-year deals, 2030 would be the latest point where a key decision would be made. He's only just settled in London and enjoys it, so he'd accept what was to come. Prior to Juliano's arrival, Leo kept getting asked about him by his teammates. Although, due to his basic English, his answer came off as a joke. Then it became official, as Juliano Mateus was introduced as Chelsea's number 23. Leo had the number 9. Rest in peace, Juliano. Nevertheless, they finally interacted.
Leônidas? E aí?
And then Leo spat at his feet and walked away. Okay, no, he wouldn't do that. He just responded, not much, because he's not a complete psycho. Added to that, with a large Portuguese-speaking contingent in the locker room, it would be best to try and get along. After failing to score in 12 straight games, Leo would be dropped versus Everton, in which Juliano debuted and scored 3 minutes in. By the end, he would find a second, earning him player of the game in a 3-1 victory. Initially though, it seemed that they would be sharing the field. Leo got a chance in the FA Cup versus Wolves, and he'd remind people not to overlook him. That was all well and good, but the question on everyone's mind was when these two would start together up top. That day came on February 5th, 2027. Chelsea were hosting Luton Town, and with a Brazilian pair linking up for the first time in 3.5 years, nothing really happened for a while as Luton stunk the joint. While the difference maker would arrive from Moises Caicedo to secure the game, Oliver skipping down the byline delivers a ball in, and it was at the perfect height for Juliano Mateus. With that and some minor contributions, he was praised, while Leônidas looked off, and that continued for the remainder of the season. Unai favored playing Juliano with someone else, leading to Leo's minutes diminished. Only one start in the league since Luton. Despite looking completely off, that didn't impact his Brazilian call-up. Juliano would receive 13 starts for the Blues, grabbing 4 goals and 3 assists. Nothing to go crazy over, but a respectable opening 5 months in England. As a team though, Chelsea disappointingly finished in 5th, 1 point off the Premier League last year to nearly 20 behind Everton. It was an inconsistent 2027. With the rumors of Leo and Juliano's past slowly coming into light, that didn't help things. However, it got worse in Los Angeles during Chelsea's summer tour. First, let's update Chelsea's striker options. Kai Havertz's loan ended, and Nicholas Jackson didn't join United, so there is still competition for one spot. Christopher Nkunku was a lock, especially if he could avoid injuries and bring back his form prior to the Brazilians' arrivals. The desired spot would be decided in preparation for the new campaign. On a scorching day in the City of Angels, training was going on, and Unai decided to start the Brazilians together for a scrimmage. The two were feeling frustrated on the pitch, misplaced passes, taking shots at low chance areas, not playing each other in when it was the better option. The synergy wasn't there. It began to show with their body language, but soon became verbal, escalating quickly. A sarcastic remark from Juliano sparked something inside Leo. When there are unresolved issues continuously being set aside, eventually things will boil over. A fiery exchange in Portuguese ensued, and in blind rage, Leo attempted a punch. They quickly be pulled apart and sent to separate locations. An emergency meeting followed with the coaching and upstairs staff. Luckily, it wasn't a public training session, but the club didn't need the drama to potentially leak. Arguments happen in training, but this was different. The higher-ups arrived to make a decision, although another individual accompanied them. He was forced to train with the under-21s for a brief period as punishment. Even a sale was considered, but that was waved away for several reasons. He was slowly introduced back into the first team. Unfortunately, his fate was set as a bench player. Unai also forced him to train at right wing if he ever wanted to start consistently. There's nothing wrong with learning a new position, but that wasn't the role promised when he initially signed. Worst of all, Leo lost the number 9 to Juliano Mateus as additional punishment. What a pity, you're now number 11. However, it signified for the striker position, Juliano was and will always be favored over him. The right call seemed to have been made, as Chelsea and Juliano were excelling. He made 16 appearances in the Premier League and scored 9. These performances led to his first call-up to the Seleção, where he appeared in World Cup qualifying versus Venezuela. More than a month later, he would grab his second cap and score against Peru. It seemed as though Juliano was on his way to become Brazil's number 9, until an unfortunate moment prior to Christmas. Chelsea were coming off a hugely disappointing loss to Norwich. Leonites was given a rare start, where he and Nicholas Jackson dropped absolute disaster classes. Juliano was rested after scoring versus Palace on the weekend, but there may have been more to it. He was feeling tightness in his hip, although Unai stated he was being rested for fitness. The next day at Cobham, he was going for a lot of sprints, and late on in the session, he collapsed. It indeed was a hip injury that could only be caused by wear and tear. He actually felt something there for a while, but kept it hidden as he was playing the best football of his career. Now, he'd be out for close to 3 months. Subsequently, a striker spot was open for Nicholas Jackson. Nah, I'm kidding. Despite a lack of minutes, Leo surprisingly showed an excellent attitude in training, even when he was forced to play out wide. When one man's opportunity is lost, another gets a chance. He'd get that on Boxing Day versus Arsenal. They were down by 1, but in his first start of the season at striker, Mudryk would find him for the equalizer. Although, he did play up top in other competitions. A few weeks prior, they faced Arsenal in the EFL Cup quarters, where he started with Nkunku and aided him in a 3-2 victory. Back to the present fixture, that scoreline would be matched, as his confidence was starting to return. A few days later, the Mudryk-Leo connection linked up again as he scored against Manchester City. While that didn't result in a win, Leo began finding his feet again. Unfortunately, with a sudden increase in minutes, he did suffer some fitness issues. That led to only 6 league starts over this period, but he did bag in 4. Added to that were several appearances in the Champions League, including goals against Manchester United in the round of 16. Plus the EFL Cup semis. He was doing the job in the FA Cup as well, helping the Blues reach the quarters with a couple of braces. His side even made the EFL Cup final, where Leo was yanked at the half even with Nkunku not being available. To be fair, the Blues almost won it, but thanks to a 92nd minute Haaland goal, they fell apart in extra time. It was a nice run for Leo, but in the middle of March, Juliano returned. This harshly cut Leo's minutes, but in Juliano's 2 appearances prior to the international break, he scored a pen versus Tottenham and grabbed the game-winning goal versus Bristol City in the FA Cup quarters. The good news for Leo though was that the Brazilian coach Bruno Lage recognized his efforts and called him up for the World Cup qualifiers. In order to avoid re-aggravating his hip, Juliano wasn't there, but Brazil's attacking options remained electric. Vini Jr., Rodrigo, Martinelli, Antony, and Endrick. The latter, who spent these past 4 years in Madrid, was consistently scoring 10 plus in La Liga. Versus Argentina, Leo was on the bench, but would make a late appearance, earning his 2nd international cap and helping, in a minuscule way, to defeat the Argentines. 3 days later, at the location of the first World Cup final versus Uruguay, Leo started and wouldn't waste his opportunity. A goal and an assist helped Brazil cruise past Uruguay. Leo received plaudits, which did him a world of good for a potential Copa America spot. But it wasn't guaranteed, as back at Chelsea, his appearances remained limited. Recovering from international travel, he was rested for West Ham and wouldn't appear in Chelsea's trip to Real Madrid. Then on Saturday versus Aston Villa, Unai made a big risk. With a second leg against Real Madrid on Tuesday, he chose to rest Nkunku and left Nicholas Jackson on the bench. Meaning, for the first time since that preseason incident, Juliano and Leo would start up top. Obviously they trained that way in preparation, but that was limited due to the amount of fixtures present. Unlike their previous start in a competitive fixture, Leo actually had a solid performance. Although, similar to the past, Juliano found the headlines grabbing a brace. Helps when you're in charge of pens. Unluckily, Leo suffered an abdominal strain, leaving him out of action for 3 weeks. During that span, Real knocked out Chelsea, Nicholas Jackson clutched up in the FA Cup semi-final versus Arsenal, and lost to Everton in the league. Why was that important? Because that would impact their chances of lifting the Premier League. Leo returned with Palace on the 3rd to last match day, seeing Nicholas Jackson cook again. Following was yet another win over Arsenal, meaning they were a point behind Manchester City, with them at home on the last match day. Regrettably for the Blues, it finished scoreless, and City lifted the Premier League on their ground. However, their season wasn't finished, as they had a FA Cup final a week later versus West Ham. The plan as usual was for Nkunku to start with Juliano. He missed the EFL Cup, so he was determined to lift some silverware this season. However, on the last training session, Juliano's hip collided with a teammate. The same hip that took him out for 3 months. The severity of the injury was apparent, as on the next day, he wasn't even listed on the bench. Meaning, Leo got the start, as Nicholas Jackson dropped to his knees in disappointment. Although, this game wouldn't be remembered too fondly amongst the neutrals. It was a cagey affair where neither backlines let up any easy chances, Leo included, who was having it rough finding any sort of space. Despite being built like a tank weighing in at 87 kilos, he was only 177 centimeters. Nkunku was at 178, meaning Zuma and Mavropanos were having their way with them. Juliano would have been able to cause a nuisance. What about Jackson? He has a decent frame, yet was as light as a feather. So this went to extra time. In a game with no clear chances, it had to take something special. Ecuadorian substitute Kendry Paez took a shot from a tough angle and banged it in the top bins. Out of nothing, that handed Chelsea the FA Cup. In spite of a dreadful performance, Leo got to lift his first trophy since his academy days. On Juliano's side, he was devastated not to be involved in the game, but a greater fear lied elsewhere. With Copa America beginning in less than a month, would he be able to play in it? A day after Chelsea's celebrations, the news came out. Juliano will miss the tournament as he re-aggravated his previous hip injury. In a season where everything was seemingly going his way, twice did his hip not agree with that. It was the 2028 Copa America hosted in Paraguay. This competition includes everyone from South America and the 6 best countries from North and Central America, containing 4 groups of 4. Brazil's featured Canada, the USA, along with Peru. The top 2 advanced to the quarterfinals. It may look straightforward for the Seleção, but not so fast. 4 years ago, the Americans went on an incredible run. World Cup winners Argentina in the quarters, smoking Brazil in the semis, and triumphing past Jamaica in the final to win Copa America. 3 of the 4 countries in the semis were from up north, which embarrassed the integrity of CONMEBOL, the governing body of South American football. For Leo, this would be his first international tournament, and despite there being a few veteran strikers in the squad, the coach Bruno Lage has been impressed. And while that didn't earn him the number 9, he'd start versus the States. Early on, it appeared to be the right choice, as he was sent through, only to be denied by Matt Turner. Chances continued to be exchanged by both sides, although nothing as threatening compared to Leo's until Vinicius Jr.'s back post attempt prior to the half. The Brazilians became frustrated with their lack of clinicalness, but at added time, a corner was misjudged by the American keeper as Eder Militao took advantage. A deserved lead, but in the second half, the Americans received a corner of their own, and Weston McKennie equalized the match. Following, Leo was doing a lot of work outside of the box, but struggled to receive chances himself. The US seemingly built that wall, but a questionable pass led to a massive Brazil chance, only for it to be squandered as a draw was settled. Endrick called for focus with the Canadians up next. Surely, a win was on the board. The Maple Syrup Chuggers defeated Peru previously, and prior to this fixture, the States defeated the Peruvians as well, putting them at 4 points. Leo got another start, and like the previous game, he got an early chance, yet somehow missed the net. Then it remained quiet. So quiet, you'd forget that any Brazil attacker was on the pitch. Leo was subbed off for Endrick, but nothing happened, as it ended in a stalemate. Vinicius' performances emphasized Brazil's lacklusterness, as fans became concerned with the players and the coach. Regardless, they just had to defeat an already eliminated Peru to advance to the quarters. Meanwhile, the North American nations had the same points and goal difference. Big decisions had to be made, and Endrick in for Leo was one of them. An understandable choice, but would it lead to anything different? Yeah, as Brazil finally scored their first from open play thanks to Lucas Paqueta. Questionable defending by the Peruvians, but you take those. In the second half, Endrick would set up Bruno Guimaraes, crucially giving Brazil a goal difference of +2. With the other fixture resulting in a draw, both of them finished on +1, seeing Canada eliminated by goals scored. That set up the quarterfinals, where Brazil faced hosts Paraguay. Despite the showing so far, Bruno Lage controversially started Leo Anites. An interesting decision, especially with Endrick's contributions. But maybe he saw Leo being able to take advantage of Paraguay's Julian Cisco scores in the 6th minute. Behind for the first time this tournament, there was a look of concern, as the only notable moments was Leo's free kick and Bruno's pot shot. With a crucial 45 minutes incoming, commentators and pundits gave us a history lesson. Brazil has lost to Paraguay in the Copa America quarters on several occasions. Firstly, 2011 saw what was probably the worst penalty shootout on South American soil. Seriously, how do you not score a single pen? Then it happened again in 2015. Fast forwarding to 2019, and Brazil did defeat them in, of course, a penalty shootout. Yet Paraguay did have their number, and with Argentina not even in the knockout stages, Brazil would regret it if they couldn't win here. The second half began, and they looked sharp, as Leo was played in, but he was stopped. Still, a promising start that continued minutes later. Rodrigo at right wing, who currently works at Manchester City, passed it to Leo. The youngster returned it, and the winger smacked the iron. He'd be taken off by Endrick, who got a chance himself, but hit the crossbar. Nothing was going Brazil's way, as the final whistle blew, sending them out of Copa America. Leo improved, but that chance, man. He received criticism for it, yet the majority of it was lashed out at Vinicius, who once again performed poorly. It was night and day compared to the World Cup qualifiers. As a result, Bruno Lage was sent packing, as many questioned his aging side. Some asked, what if Juliano Mateus didn't get injured? He provided something no other attacker had with his combination of his height and athleticism. He was devastated about his luck, but was motivated to prove himself in the upcoming campaign. He wasn't the only one. In the Premier League opener though, who would start? Neither. No, don't worry, not another fight. Juliano recently recovered from his hip injury and was gaining fitness, while Leo suffered a hamstring strain late in Chelsea's victory over Manchester City in the Community Shield, a painful way to lift the trophy. So this story has changed, as it was now Angelo's race to become Brazil's number 9. Okay, that wouldn't happen, but when they returned from injury, they initially shared playing time. Maybe it was to ease them back in, but the tension began to resurface between them. However, Unai had a plan. With Nkunku entering his 30s, he knew in due course the two Brazilians would start together. So against Sunderland in the middle of September, he did just that. They lost 2-0. So rotation it was in the Premier League. They did pair up on a few more occasions. Brentford in November saw a brace from Juliano, followed by less success at the Emirates later in the month. Yet, with mixed results by December, he kept forcing it. Internationally though, both were having relative success, as in 6 fixtures for Brazil, they each scored twice in limited minutes. Although new coach Rogério Ceni seemed to have favored Leo. Whether that's the right choice or not is up to debate. As Unai continued to pursue his plan, Chelsea's performances improved, as by April, they were pushing Manchester United for the title. Along the way, Leo leveled up, performing exceptionally. Not as much on the score sheet, but he was providing a lot of goals. In the new year, they went on an 8-match undefeated run, and only dropped points twice by the middle of April. Unfortunately, they were knocked out of every cup competition. With 4 fixtures left, could they win the Premier League? At this period, Juliano was starting to get into his own head. He was still playing well, but not near the level prior to his hip injuries. Not receiving a call-up to crucial World Cup qualifiers certainly didn't help. That wasn't the case for Leo Anites, as he received a start away at Argentina. He scored a tap-in thanks to Rodrigo, as they made history by winning in Argentina for the first time since 2009. Making it worse for Juliano, Unai began preferring Leo and Nkunku together in crucial April matches. Leo started in all 4 of these, and despite scoring none, Chelsea won in each. Plus, he earned the start on the penultimate match day versus Wolves, where he didn't score, but Chelsea won again. Clearly, Leo was starting to become more of a provider, which Juliano was limited in. Unfortunately, everything came crashing down on the last game versus Manchester City, where yet again, Chelsea fell short. A bittersweet end to the campaign for the Blues, who finished runners-up for the 3rd time in 4 years. Still, they gotta celebrate when Nkunku earned the PFA Player of the Year, along with Leo Anites finishing on top of the assist chart and winning the PFA Young Player of the Year. The World Cup was in 1 year though, and rumors began to swirl as Leo had 12 months left on his deal. If his contract was ending now, re-signing may have been the move. He's been playing the best football of his career, Unai Emery trusted him, and everything nearly paid off.
Terrible, terrible night.
It has been reported that Unai Emery has been sacked by Chelsea Football Club. Fortaleza were relegated in 2028. It was unimaginable a few years prior with two of the best prospects in Brazil. Over the following months and years, stories began spreading. People knew of Robert Mateus's financial involvement with the club, but they didn't know the power he had. He wasn't spending millions on the kindness of his heart. It begins with Leo and Juliano's release. Fortaleza knew about his ability, so why would they not keep him? Well, it was a decision heavily influenced by Robert. He promised them an upgrade in facilities if Juliano was chosen instead of Leo for the first team. He'd also promise a little extra if Leo's contract was not renewed. So that ill-fated day happened. All allegedly done to give his son the quickest opportunity to get minutes in Brazil's top flight, even at the expense of a kid. Was it necessary? He didn't want to risk it. This, of course, was denied by everyone involved. Still, why leave Fortaleza only 2 years later for so cheap? Well, a new contract was signed by Juliano, and it stated that if Fortaleza failed to qualify for the Libertadores, a 1.6 million release clause can be activated by a participating club. Fortaleza didn't have a problem as they expected to qualify or see him leave for the European release clause. However, Juliano was improving at a significant pace, and by the time he turned 18, he and his entourage decided not to go to Europe yet. Stay in Brazil, make some history with Santos, and leave looking undeniably as Brazil's future number 9. Why to Chelsea though? Well, not much wasn't revealed in the report. The news could have been a brutal PR hit for Juliano. Thankfully for him, with it coming out after Brazil's disappointing Copa America, in which he didn't appear in, a lot of fans outside of the Serra region brushed it aside in the coming days, especially with crazy Neymar news. It also didn't impact new boss Rogério Ceni calling up Juliano. For Leo though, he wasn't surprised, and made him think Juliano's move to Chelsea had malicious intentions. Speaking of the Blues, the 2029-30 campaign was disastrous. Sacking Unai Emery was questionable, as his replacement Guillermo Ochoa did a job. They finished 7th, and the only highlight was Juliano Mateus winning his second PFA Young Player of the Year. And Chroo was starting to slow down, Leo suffered multiple injuries that prevented him from continuing last season's form, and Ochoa's tactics, despite similar in shape to Emery, were clearly not as effective. Plus, Pochettino became Everton manager, finished in 4th, and earned the Manager of the Year. The toughest pill to swallow was Leo exploring free agency at the end of his deal, although he'd begin to think about contracts when the World Cup was over. In the lead up to the tournament, the headache of who to play at striker was intensifying. In Brazil's first friendly featuring Montenegro, Endrick scored. In their second versus Norway, Leo and Juliano grabbed a brace in an emphatic victory. Then, concluding the warm-ups, was against 2026 World Cup finalists, Denmark. That was a tournament of dreams, seeing Ukraine make the quarters, Egypt in the semis, and the Danes making it all the way, only to fall short to England. At last, they brought it home. Regardless, Juliano made his mark and scored in the friendly. Even so, they wasted a bunch of chances, leading to Denmark stealing a goal late. The missed opportunities reminded many of Copa America. Taking time to think with his coaching staff, Rogério Ceni gave the number 9 to Gabriel Jesus. Still a seniority thing, I suppose. However, many predicted that no matter who started, Brazil should have no issues of qualifying from a group with New Zealand, Scotland, and Croatia. The latter may be the group decider. Nevertheless, with the tournament hosted in Turkey, the crowd was packed to witness Brazil versus New Zealand. The lineup would have the 36-year-old Ederson in net, Roger Ibanez paired with Bremer at center halves, which brought forth issues. There were no good Brazilian fullbacks, as guys who could play very well at center back like Gilbert and Eder Militao were forced out wide. The midfield too would be pivoted by Bruno Guimaraes, an aggressive tackler, Clemerson Bocayuva. The number 10 was surprisingly filled by Inter's Loran. In less shocking fashion, the wings were filled by Rodrigo on the right and Vinicius on the left. The latter especially was under a lot of pressure to perform for his country, as he was coming off a 17-goal campaign in La Liga. The number 9 wouldn't be wearing that digit, as Leo and Juliano was given his first World Cup start. In comparison to New Zealand, this shouldn't have been a contest, yet it was 0-0 at the half. Chances were sporadic, as New Zealand defended with resolve. Still, the Kiwis weren't offering much, but with a throw-in in the 65th, that quickly changed. McCowett stunned the Brazilians. Rogério's response was to bring on center back to midfield. To be fair, that allowed Clemerson to make bursting runs forward, but scoring isn't his specialty. For Gabriel Martinelli, it should be, but he missed a big chance with less than 15 to go. Leo was nowhere to be seen either, as the match commenced, and New Zealand pulled off one of the biggest upsets in the tournament's history. A huge blow to the Brazilians. But teams have come off poor opening results and went on to win the whole thing, and Scotland were the best opponents to rebound against. They also lost their opening fixture, so it was do or die for both. Changes made for Brazil was placing Ibanez in defensive midfield. There were a few switches in the defense, along with Martinelli starting over Rodrigo. Leo, like in Copa America, was given another chance. Meanwhile, Scotland had the talent, especially at fullback. But would a retiring Callum McGregor be able to anchor the midfield? Better yet, would Leo shine on the big stage? It wouldn't take long to get an answer. Martinelli won the ball in the midfield and immediately sent the ball through to Leo, and he missed the net. He didn't deliver, but Vinicius Jr. finally did. A beautiful shot that brought much relief to the Brazilians. The pressure continued to pile onto Scotland, as they'd need a miracle to avoid defeat. Right before the half, however, Vinny went for another shot, but losing his footing led to a nasty tackle. He pleaded his case, but the ref had no choice, as a red card was shown. Down to 10 in the second half, Scotland began controlling this match. In the 63rd minute, a cross from Doig caused an own goal by Bremer. 5 minutes later, they nearly took the lead. Pressure was building on Brazil. Failing to win here would turn an unacceptable World Cup into a complete failure. Despite the disadvantage, they made opportunities, but either Boca Juve was on the end of them or Scotland defended incredibly. The Scots still hadn't had a shot on net. That would change in added time. It wasn't from this corner kick. Instead, seconds from the end, Scotland reached Brazil's final third with several men forward. Ben Doak's ball found Connor Smith, giving the Scots an unforgettable victory. Looking at the stats, it brought the Brazilians onto their knees. 1 shot on target and 2 conceded. With Brazil basically out of the World Cup, the main headline was Vinicius' red card. The media tore into him as his wonder goal was forgotten. He received vitriol, and while some of it was deserved, he at least scored. That can't be said about Rodrigo, Endrick, Martinelli, and especially Leo Anites. 5 starts in competitive tournaments and nothing. Maybe his chances were limited, but you have to score the clear ones. In their final group game against Croatia, similarly to Copa America, Leo was benched. Not for Juliano, who wouldn't receive a single minute at this World Cup. It was Endrick, which didn't change a damn thing, as a late Croatia goal sent them out of their misery with a record of 0-0-3, their worst result in the 100-year history of the World Cup. Many were lambasted as disgraces and should never wear the kit again.
Agora fazemos isso do meu jeito.
Rogério Ceni has been let go by Brazil after a disgraceful World Cup. The next manager of the Seleção, Leo Anites, has agreed terms to join. Marquinhos is now the coach of Brazil. A change of scenery can do a world of good. For Leo, it was necessary, ever since he was labeled into a group named Os Desonados. His disappointments in international tournaments already had fans displeased. It wasn't only him, but it became apparent that those in the CBF had something against him. He moved to Bayern on a free in the summer, and in Marco Rose's 2-striker formation, he developed a great partnership with Frenchman Mathis Tel. That led to Bayern winning the league after failing the year prior. While both finished as top scorers with 24 each, Leo's 6 assists earned him the Toria Gercanone. The cannon was cool, and so were all the other awards he won in his debut campaign. These were impressive feats, especially with his friend 6 months earlier, finishing runner-up in the World Player of the Year, 3rd in FIFA's The Best Men's Player, and making the FIFA Pro World 11. Snubbed for any Ballon d'Or nominations though. For Leo, the plaudits he was receiving did not result in an international call-up. Neither for the initial friendlies or for the World Cup qualifiers that began in 2031. According to sources, new Brazil manager Marquinhos had little interest in calling up certain names. A shakeup was required in this new era, and with many options in attack, it was the chance for others to showcase themselves. Brazil planned to use the 4-2-3-1, but a big issue was their aging defense. Militao was elite, but with Father Time starting to catch up, options around him either aged out, moved to Saudi, or were good, but not great. At keeper, it was the same, with Ederson and Alisson both retired from the Seleção, leaving Bento as the first option, for now. The fullbacks brought some controversy. Brazil hadn't developed many good ones recently, with Carlos Augusto being the leading candidate on the left. That was until he quickly lost his pace. In arguably the most crucial position on the pitch, the leading options on both sides were former Serra players and friends of Leo. Carlos Wilson, who is still at his Brazilian club, and Arnaldo, who recently moved to Manchester United. However, he transferred from Flamengo, and out of the 23 selected for the squad, 6 were contracted there. Plus, Bruninho was here. The problem of aging continued in the midfield. Talented players for sure, but several are entering their 30s. It's the attack that's fairly young. Outside of Rodrigo, who can fill across the front 4, there was the promising Estevão, wingers like Savio, Mateus Gonçalves, PSG's new attacker Endrick, and of course, Juliano Mateus up front. His season at Chelsea saw less injuries, earning him 14 goals in 34 starts. He'd also score a brace, including the game winner in Chelsea's Conference League triumph over Frankfurt. With them returning to the Champions League for the 2031-32 campaign, there was an important fixture prior to the new season's first international break, Chelsea visiting Bayern. Convenient that Juliano Mateus is out with an injury. Bayern would dominate, with Leo scoring right before the half, choosing not to celebrate against his former club. Leo nearly capped it off with an outrageous free kick, but by the end, the match ended 3-0. Yet he and the others continued to be snubbed. This was Juliano's time to shine. Injured for the Copa America, benched in all the losses at the World Cup, he has now found his way as Brazil's number 9. With the World Cup qualifying beginning, could the country build momentum to Copa America in less than 2 years? It seemed that Brazil's attacking flair was back to not scoring. It began to click in the second half. Off a corner, Juliano Mateus won a header, which led to Rodrigo breaking the silence. That opened the floodgates, as they went on to win 3-0. Juliano wasn't the star, but a promising start for Brazil's new era. In the second fixture versus Colombia, his impact was less noticeable, yet the side were dominant. With a 2-0 lead, Marquinhos made changes prior to the 80th as this looked done. Minutes later, however, Colombia found one due to poor marking. Before the 90th minute, a Colombia goal kick was knotted further behind, and it was their striker onto it first. He caught Bento out and dinged him for the equalizer, stunning the crowd. A month later versus Venezuela, Juliano would score a goal to aid in the victory. The real challenge was right after, as Brazil hosted Diego Simeone's Argentina. Long from the Messi days, they had veterans in the squad like McAllister, Enzo Fernandez, and Christian Romero. On the other hand, most of the remaining names have only broken through in recent years. Using a strong lineup, the Brazilians would go ahead first. Before the half though, Brazil's defenders were up for a set piece, and the delivery was grabbed. Argentina's keeper would find Avramidis behind everyone, equalizing the affair. Later on, Argentina's Rivero received the ball, and he took a chance from distance, which paid off as Bento missed the ball. Argentina's surprising victory brought back uncertainty for Brazilians. Away games have been fine, but these home matches are not ending well. Is there still some sense of nervousness when playing in front of a previously disappointed fan base? These are games where you're supposed to win, but this Brazil side has struggled. Scapegoats were listed, but Marquinhos needed to figure this out, especially with the exiled ones gaining popularity with the annoyed supporters, particularly with Leo, who was taking Bayern by storm. He made the bench of the FIFA Pro 11. The media had begun changing their tune on him, thinking he may deserve a call-up instead of João Pedro. That quickly changed in the March World Cup qualifier against Uruguay, where João Pedro was put in for an unfit Juliano. He balled out, scoring a pen and grabbing an assist in a massive 3-0 win. A couple debutants appeared, which included Alexandre José, who's a brilliant playmaker and can do it in the offensive third. Then there's Iago Ferreira, to hopefully be a defensive solution. Still young, but he was joined alongside Gilbert, who can fill across the entire defense. He was selected in the past, but was picked for the first time by new management. Finally achieving a home result, more questions were asked. Is João Pedro destined to be Brazil's permanent number 9? Well, it'd be unfair to answer that until Juliano starts a game, and he'd do so versus Peru. I think he took the previous query personally. A great pass by Alexandre José to find him for the first. Later, beautiful work by the playmaker led to the ball reaching Bruninho, who went on to assist the number 9. Later on, Bra would find Juliano again, as with a hat-trick, his spot was safe. Can we say Brazil's back? Let's find out at Copa America. Club-wise, Juliano's Chelsea finished 3rd in the league, with him being the 3rd best scorer in the division, well behind Erling Haaland. No trophy this year though, as unlike last year's Conference League triumph, Guilherme Ochoa's men were knocked out in the Champions League round of 16. Juliano, of course, was called up by Brazil. Leo and who had his greatest season of his career, was not just Bundesliga winners with Bayern, but DFB Pokal too. Top scorer in the league, best overall player as well, European Golden Shoe runner-up, thanks to Haaland being on demon mode, 36 goals and 10 assists in all competitions was breathtaking. His partnership with Mathis Tel was being admired worldwide, but it wasn't enough for the Champions League. In the semis, a 2-0 win over Manchester United was not enough to reverse the first leg embarrassment. Their opponents went on to win the final versus Inter, where the Nerazzurri missed the opening 3 spot kicks. United's success included a breakout year from German striker Axel Novak. The 2032 Copa America was hosted in Chile. Brazil's group had Bolivia without their altitude advantage, Honduras, who were the 2nd worst ranked CONCACAF nation in the competition, and Venezuela, who were Brazil's toughest opponent with a FIFA ranking of 71st. If the Seleção doesn't cruise through this, then what's the point? Going into the tournament, Juliano had been in incredible form, grabbing himself a brace in a friendly versus Jamaica. The team was feeling good as they entered the pitch versus Honduras. Although, Juliano's job is simple: find the space, and someone will find him, as Gonçalves did a half hour in. The Atletico Madrid winger was a revelation since being selected almost 2 years ago. Yet the side couldn't overlook Honduras, as if it wasn't for Luis Junior's 2 solid saves, it'd be leveled by the break. Despite that, a dominant performance so far, which frustrated their opponents. Beginning the second half, Andre received a 2-footed challenge to his Achilles, as the Honduran offender got sent off. Minutes later, Endrick was pushed in the box, as Juliano converted the pen. Then more discipline issues from Honduras, as Alexandre José brilliantly dribbled into the box and gets taken down. So, with a brace, Juliano stepped up and converted once again, his first ever hat-trick in his Copa America debut, as the Seleção lifted off with a 3-0 victory. If that's what happens to the 86th ranked nation in the world, what about Bolivia, who are 96th? No hat-trick, but a brace for Juliano, as this was a bloodbath. Even Carlos Wilson scored in a 5-0 victory. A path to the quarters was confirmed, and with mostly everyone rotated versus Venezuela, Juliano wasn't. A first half brace, which should have been a hat-trick if not for this point-blank miss. 9 points and top spot to Brazil, leading to this knockout bracket. Tougher than the groups for sure, but they were easily the favorites to make the final over USA, Mexico, and Chile. Easy, they say? That shouldn't be the mentality when you're up against the 11th ranked nation in the world. Sure, the States haven't found their world-class star yet, although Balogun is a solid striker, and attackers like Tillman and Timothy Weah were strong options. Curiously though, they didn't start Daniel Pesquisa. This was Brazil's lineup, with the only significant adjustment being João Pedro behind the striker, rather than Rodrigo or Estevao. The former was injured, yet was included on the bench. It was a slow start to the game, with nothing to note for over 30 minutes. That was until Alexandre José threaded the needle to Juliano, but the defender's presence forced him to shoot it near post. Endrick followed up a few minutes later, but didn't get it on target. Those were the best chances Brazil would earn for the entire 90. The States defended incredibly, as their center halves closed any holes previously allowed. It became frustrating for Brazil, and manager Marquinhos made a controversial decision to sub off Juliano 15 minutes before the end. The striker was pissed, especially with this game going to penalties. No extra time in the quarters. These countries' fates will be sealed by who can handle the pressure, and the Americans clearly couldn't. Brazil slotted all 4, moving on to face hosts Chile. The scenes were incredible at the Municipal Esteroa Rebolledo, as the hosts stunned 10th ranked Mexico with a 94th minute winner from Ben Brereton Diaz. This Brazil side hasn't faced Chile in World Cup qualifiers yet, but if you remember the previous Copa America where they faced a host nation, a 6-minute Enciso goal resulted in failure. It now needed to be different. A spot to the final was on the line, and with a few changes to the 11, the 6th minute became important again. Brazil wins the ball in the attacking third, and Estevao finds Juliano for an early opener, silencing the crowd. The intensity continued. Juninho hit the post. Juliano headed the ball over the bar. Then half an hour in, he was sent in for a one-on-one, but missed the net. Estevao followed with a big miss before the half. It was incredible how Brazil weren't runaway victors, especially with this corner scramble. Yet the score remained 1-0 until the 75th minute. Brazil had a perfect defense throughout this tournament, but a slight misjudgment in marking led to Allende being found and equalizing the match. The home crowd rejoiced as chi chi chi, le 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 chants erupted. Prior to the 90th, Estevao had a decent opportunity but failed, bringing forth extra time. Many thought previous to the equalizer that this was set to be a bloodbath, and it did become that, if you consider red cards to be part of that definition. Both sides saw second yellows, seeing a 10v10 until the end. Outside of this near big mistake by Luis Junior, it remained at a standstill as penalties once again determined Brazil's future. Juliano was long off at this point, but the shootout was going smoothly. The injured Rodrigo slotted first again, Savio followed, and Eder Militao too. Chile did the same. 3-all entering the 4th round, Estevao was up, and he banged it home. Vegas for Chile was then snuffed out by Luis Junior. Vanderson would seal the decision, as Brazil were into the final of Copa America. Their opponents wouldn't be Argentina, as they were defeated by the 2028 winners, Ecuador. A stunning result, but the Ecuadorians were a strong side, with tricky players to go along an established base. One was Juliano's former teammate, Moises Caicedo, who moved to Bayern years ago for over 200 million. There was also his current colleague, Kendry Paez. Storylines were there, but the storytelling had to wait, because the first half was brutal. These two were putting nearly 57,000 fans to sleep. Granted, caginess is common in finals, but for the tournament's top scorer Juliano, he'd play no part after the hour mark. Subbed off for João Pedro, like in many important Brazilian matches of the past, he had to sit and watch. Advancing the clock to the 84th minute, Ecuador's Tubis pulled off a moment of magic as 5 Brazilians couldn't take the ball from him, as Ecuador took the lead. A game that saw almost nothing. It was Ecuador stepping closer to retain Copa America. Numbers began to be thrown forward, and fullbacks needed to take more risks. It was minutes if not seconds before the ref's last whistle, and a Savio cross was headed away to the feet of Carlos Wilson. Labeled as Brazil's weak spot, he sees a path for Loran, and the Brazilian attacking midfielder made no mistake. A 94th minute equalizer sent this to extra time. The drama couldn't be repeated in the 30 minutes given. As for a third game in a row, Brazil's destiny was determined by penalties. It's not easy to win a lottery, let alone twice. But can a Seleção get it done again? João Pedro, who was put in for Juliano, was stepping up first. The Flamengo man would be stopped. Moises Caicedo followed and did very well to take the lead. Man City's Savio got Brazil onto the scoreboard. Ecuador's miracle man Tubis ran out of magic as Luis Junior kept the score level. Militao made no mistake in the 3rd round, and Bermudez sent Luis the wrong way. The 4th round saw Alexandre José step up. Since being called up, the Liverpool man has become undroppable for the Seleção. Today wasn't his day, as Brazil went behind because Hincapié converted his. The 5th and potentially final round saw Morato give Brazil a lifeline, but a goal from Sebastian Gonzalez would seal the result, and the Ecuadorian confirmed it. Ecuador are your back-to-back winners, as Brazil falls short. After that disappointment, Juliano was interviewed after the game to give his thoughts.
O nosso time teve todas as condições certas hoje de vencer o jogo. Embora eu queria ter jogado mais e tendo um impacto maior no jogo, em qualquer outro dia, é um Brasil que estaria levantando esse troféu.
He then was asked if any unpicked players could have been useful today, like his former teammate Leo Anites.
Se o Leônidas queria estar aqui para jogar futebol, ele deveria ter aproveitado suas oportunidades ao invés de ser um bagre quando o Brasil precisava dele. Ai, gente, me desculpa, mas não quero responder mais pergunta.
The 2032 Olympics in Australia saw the return of Os Desonados for the under-23 side. Football at the Olympics is different from your ordinary competitions. Where at Copa America or the World Cup, everyone is available, that's not the case here. FIFA prevents the best from competing, which is why the under-23 squads are used. To make up for it, 3 players over the age limit are allowed to be selected, as long as it's okay with their respective clubs. Which 3 extremely talented Brazilians that haven't been selected for the main squad for years would be available? Gabriel Martinelli, who's won a couple trophies since being ostracized. He's done well, but is past his peak. Then there's Vinicius Jr., arguably the greatest Brazilian footballer of the past decade. His club form has continued to excel with Real Madrid, winning La Ligas and even the Club World Cup in 2029. This will be the first time wearing the yellow and blue since his red card versus Scotland. Finally, Leo Anites returned to the fold. His years at Chelsea had way too many ups, downs, and toxicity. Leaving after the World Cup was the smartest decision of his career, as he became one of the top strikers in the game. This all happened thanks to Bernardino taking over the Olympic job. Thanks to some good references, including Juliano, he convinced everyone involved to bring in the 3. His career has gone through some stumbling blocks, but this was an incredible opportunity to build himself up. When he was able to include the 3 previously annexed Brazilians back into the fold, that brought great intrigue at home for the tournament. With a group of South Korea, Senegal, and Germany, the Brazilians scored 10. Leo grabbed 3, including a brace against South Korea, while Vinicius and Martinelli got involved too. Japan in the quarters, a dominant performance on both ends of the pitch, which saw Leo get his 4th of the tournament. Romania in the semis, thanks to a couple pens, Leo grabbed all 4 strikes, as Romania was sent to the bronze medal game. So, in Brisbane, at a packed out 52,000 capacity stadium, we witnessed Brazil versus Argentina. Olympic gold in many sports is the pinnacle. Many can compete at an event, team, or individual. However, only one every 4 years can earn that medal. It is different in football nowadays, but home crowd or not, it means a lot winning it. In the final, Leo Anites would be found twice, as his brace earned Brazil their 3rd ever gold medal in football. His 10 goals throughout the tournament gave him the golden boot, matching the highest tally at an Olympics since Ferenc Bene for Hungary in 1964. According to tournament organizers, they scored the 3 best goals of the competition, with Martinelli winning the top prize. The Dream 11 featured Leo, Vinicius, and 3 other teammates. Lastly, the best player of course went to Leo Anites. These 3 could no longer be ignored. An international triumph overshadowing the Copa America their compatriots failed to win. With that being said, would these 3 return to the Seleção? No. With this front 3, they were undroppable. In their World Cup qualifiers from September to November, they won 5 and drew 1. Still, outrage spread with the lack of ceremony to celebrate the Olympic champions. Things got more out of hand at the yearly footballing awards. First, the best FIFA men's player for 2032 went to Erling Haaland for his 7th consecutive year. Nobody cares about that. Losing by less than 20 votes was Vinicius Jr. Placing 3rd was Leo Anites. The former got into the FIFA Pro World 11, while Leo made the bench. Any more Brazilians on the list? João Pedro. To be fair, he's lighting it up with Flamengo. But with the Brazilians league's reputation being the 8th highest, how did that happen? Moving on, the very prestigious World Player of the Year award was given to Vinicius Jr. Runner-up, Leo Anites with his 36 goals and 11 assists in 42 appearances. The Ballon d'Or? We don't talk about that sham. Even with those accolades, neither were called up to the March qualifiers, despite Juliano's injury. Not even Martinelli, who at age 31 had more goals in the Premier League than Juliano. Maybe he hasn't passed his peak. Instead, João Pedro and his World 11 award earned him the start versus Argentina. At the Mas Monumental, the Mad Lad would grab a brace as Brazil stunned them 3-0. The same exact scoreline occurred in Uruguay. The concerns from the beginning of qualifying were no longer existent. Vibes were high, and qualification was guaranteed with 4 games to play at the beginning of the 2033-34 campaign. Brazil would deal with those by winning all 4, including a crazy end to the match with Ecuador again. 88:08 on the clock, Ecuador found the opener. Less than 50 seconds later, Rodrigo equalized. Then, at the literal end, Ecuador's attempt to clear a corner as Brazil won. And adding to that, Juliano grabbed another 4 goals, increasing his ridiculous tally to 26 goals in 28 caps, finishing as top scorer in qualifying. Fast forwarding to roughly 90 days before the World Cup, Juliano was preparing for the end of season run-in. He was doing well this campaign, yet Chelsea were inconsistent, albeit still with a chance in the Champions League. A month before the March international friendlies, he received a request for a meeting. It was from his former Fortaleza youth coach, Bernardino. He was in London and wanted to have a chat to catch up. Leo and Juliano may not like each other and have little in common, especially back at Fortaleza, but the opposite was true with their opinions on Bernardino. They both had a great relationship with him, and even though Juliano is a busy guy, he had no issue talking with him. However, the striker also had something to talk about. On Leo Anites's side, his scoring cooled down after last season's Bundesliga disappointment. The team recovered, especially with Mathis Tel making headlines. Bayern were still in the Champions League, facing Real Madrid following the international break. Leo was expected to miss out on the Brazil squad again. It wouldn't surprise him. And despite him and Vinicius winning every single Samba d'Or since that ill-fated World Cup, nothing he could do would change that. He's been asked in several interviews about it, but what can he say? I'll do my best to prove I deserve a call-up. His response to Juliano's comments after their Copa America defeat, I'm happy he's done well in the tournament, but as a Brazilian, I'm sad that we lost. Media-trained answers. Although, did he really feel that way? Usually, time heals all wounds, and it's easy to let go of resentment when you can find success yourself. The scary thought in his mind, though, was if the Olympics was going to be his international peak. The day came for the squad announcements, and he was right. But immediately when they were announced, a reputable Brazilian journalist came out with a shocking report. He stated that the coach didn't have the final say on who would play for the national team. Members of the CBF blacklisted 3 specific names as unwanted distractions. The 3 were Martinelli, Vinicius, and Leo Anites. It was initially for a short period, but one name insisted on maintaining that list as results were good. The main man behind this was Robert Mateus, the father of Juliano. To add credibility to his report, he was allowed to reveal the main leaker, and that was the former Brazil Olympic coach, Bernardino. The reason he leaked this was because of the lack of respect from these higher-ups towards his gold medal winning side. No collective ceremony congratulating them prior to any international matches. He never felt that the Brazilian fans were ever allowed to truly appreciate their achievement and couldn't let this go any longer, especially when he learned of this information. Pandemonium ensued online as many demanded higher-ups to resign and specific players removed from the squad. However, thanks to these 3 clubs, Hendrik, Rodrigo, and Laurent are not available for the upcoming friendlies, conveniently leaving 3 spots. In most competitions and friendlies, 23 spots are allowed, but the limit increases to 26 for the World Cup. Suddenly, Coach Marquinhos was under a lot of pressure. He needed to either double down or have a backbone for his emergency evening press conference. After some higher-ups resigned, he came out and confirmed that there were choices that were made out of his hands. However, those who were called up and played deserved their spot. Well, maybe not Bruninho. He agreed it was unfair for the Olympic winners to never be honored, so he'd do everything in his power for that to happen prior to their friendly versus Canada. Lastly, the 3 names who were withdrawn from the squad would be replaced by 3 players from that Olympic squad. On merit, they do deserve it. It'd be the return of Gabriel Martinelli, Vinicius Jr., and Leo Anites. What happened in the past was regrettable, but they're hoping to move forward with the World Cup on the horizon. The following days continued to see resignations and changes made to the Brazilian FA. Still, prior to the friendly in Cameroon, stories of Juliano and Leo's past were brought up again. Most of the players arrived a few days prior. On that Tuesday, Leo got a text from Juliano to meet up. It'd be the first time they would be near each other for years, and Leo had a lot to get off his chest. In a conversation that lasted for hours, each put out their grievances towards one another. A lot of home truths were hit, arguments occurred, and regret was shown. By the end, a mutual understanding was reached. Wouldn't let any of this affect the upcoming friendlies. They still don't get along, but they couldn't let things linger. So to cool down theories and speculation, they took a picture with each other and posted it online. Memes piled on, as it looked like a gun was being pointed at them. Juliano also had to have similar conversations with Vinicius Jr. and Martinelli. Their situations were not his fault, but it was best to get any sort of issues out of the way. Based on the 4-1 result over Cameroon, I think it's safe to say that everything is looking up. Vinicius even came on as a sub and scored late. Leo did too, but missed the pen. Maybe he should have stayed dropped. That all led to the friendly in São Luís at the Estadio Castelao. Before the match versus Canada, the Olympic heroes were honored with a roar from the crowd. The energetic atmosphere led to Leo opening the scoring in the 5th minute. Even his pal Arnaldo joined in the fun. Vinicius followed in the 22nd thanks to Martinelli's assist. But don't forget about João Pedro, who closed the game out with a brace. None of this meant Leo or the others would be confirmed for the World Cup. At the end of the day, the Brazilian squad had lost 1 game in 29 if we ignore penalties. The team was great, but with 3 extra spots, Marquinhos had a convo with Leo prior to his departure. He's in the quarters of the Champions League, a trophy that the coach only won at the end of his career. So he straight up said, if Leo can win the Champions League, no questions will be asked. He will be called up, along with Martinelli and Vinicius. If not, who knows? In the past decade, Bayern had won the Champions League twice, including prior to the 2030 World Cup, where Leonidas joined shortly after. It's been a dominant campaign for the Bavarians, but their opponents Real Madrid are the team to beat in this competition. Funny saying that, since in spite of Zidane's return, they've had an 8-year dry spell. Their top scorer wasn't the number 9 Evans Kabiru, but instead wingers, who sometimes play as strikers, Yeremy Pino and the Brazilian Vinicius Jr. With the first leg in Madrid, Marco Rosa's side were in for a rude awakening. 15 minutes in, Chouameni was found off a corner to make it 1-0. Yeremy Pino's deliveries continued to be dangerous, as less than 10 minutes later, he sent in a free kick to the far post as Leo's former teammate Levi Colwill would make it 2. This was getting ugly, and Leo's hope to guarantee a spot in the World Cup squad was dwindling. So he and his partner Mathis Tel stepped up. Past the half-hour mark, it came much easier than anticipated. Madrid's keeper made a horrendous kick to Tel, whose pass to Leo gave him the opening they needed. With 45 to go, maintaining the current gap was crucial. Instead, they conceded from another set piece. 20 to the 90th, Bayern were pushing forward, as Vinicius' pass in behind caught them out, with Yeremy Pino scoring the 4th. The tie seemed all but finished, yet a slight ray of hope appeared in the final seconds. A cross from a throw-in was aimed to Musiala, and he connected to it first, making this a 2-goal deficit. Not impossible to come back from with the second leg at home. Bayern's start was intense, limiting the amount of breathing space for their opponents. In the 24th minute, Madrid couldn't clear the corner, as Chilean midfielder Hugo Duran nodded it into danger, and Leo got to it first. Things got better before the half-hour mark. Bayern won the ball and countered. Leo would receive it, but before a decision was made, the ball was tackled directly to Duran for the aggregate equalizer. The crowd exploded, and with Evans Kabiru suffering an injury for Real, it seemed that this game was heading one way. But Zidane decided to take a risk and bring on Bruninho. He began being left out of the Seleção for good reasons. He spent years on loan to the dominant Flamengo, hoping that his return to Madrid would guarantee him a World Cup spot. In the second half, he wasn't having an impact. But the son of the great Dutch striker Robin van Persie nearly did. On for Leo, who was fatigued, he'd hit the bar and post consecutively. Bruninho had a slight chance near the end, but this was going to extra time. Nothing separated these two, with Bruninho squandering another opportunity. Penalties were up, and as expected by top professionals, the pens were continuously converted. The quality of them showed the intense mentalities these guys had, with the first 5 rounds breezing by. Sudden death began with Eric Martel, whose hope of the goaltender moving didn't come into fruition. Just like that, the dream was over. But Vuskovic tried the same thing, but Canizares realized it at the last second. Momentum is now with Bayern, as Leo's replacement was stopped. With the champion Federico Valverde next, this was done. Except it wasn't, as another huge save by Canizares. De Ligt made sure to calm things down by scoring his pen, meaning Bruninho needed to score to keep Madrid's ambitions alive. And he hit the post. Bayern were through to the semi-finals and faced Juventus. 2 games away from reaching the promised land, the star man for Juventus was a 34-year-old Dusan Vlahovic. If we ignore those who participated in the qualifiers, he was the competition's top scorer. 4 minutes in, he added to that. This was replicating the Real Madrid fixture, as they made it 2-0 15 minutes in. Unlike the previous round though, Bayern kept it together and responded 63 seconds later. Prior to the half, Leo put in a low delivery into the box that would find Musiala for the equalizer. Juventus crumbled. Previously in control, they blew their opportunity at the final for a 3rd time in 4 years. In the second leg, the Bavarians demolished the old lady as they'd score 4, the last being finished off by Leo. Bayern are back in the Champions League final, and Leo's hope for the trophy and potential World Cup spot was nearing reality. Their opponent would be his former side, Chelsea. The Blues haven't been relevant in this competition since 2021, but on their way here, they had to defeat perennial Champions League losers Inter and 3 Premier League sides, each won by a single goal. Chelsea weren't having a glorious domestic campaign, but Juliano was having another solid season, 15 in the Premier League and 10 in Europe. His partner Evan Tevenan was also a dangerous man, although the Frenchman hadn't completely figured it out. With Mathis Tel soon entering his 30s, this guy was ready to take his spot. That would be an alternate story called Numero 9, but the focus now is the fixture in Lisbon. With the 2 Brazilian number 9s finally facing off for the first time since their days in Brazil, the country had extra eyes on this. During the week leading up to the match, questions were asked about their history and the upcoming game. Similarly, they both felt it was better to answer those questions on the pitch. Lineups were released slightly over an hour before kickoff with no surprises. Right, Juliano? Both Brazilian number 9s started for their respective clubs. The symphony echoed in the background as the biggest game of their lives was beginning. Who'd be the one to make history? 5 minutes in, Bayern would win the ball and go on the break. They'd find Tel on the right, and sensing Leo in the box, his delivery found him for the opener. Even in the final, he would refuse to celebrate against his former club. But what a great feeling that must have been. The Blues weren't going to stand still, as in the 11th minute, they'd get the ball to Juliano, and he did the unexpected and passed it to his French colleague, who smashed it in. What a start for both number 9s. Although this encounter wouldn't be without controversy. Just a handful of minutes later, Bayern would find Duran at the right flank. He was given tons of space, but would be stopped by Kriklo's perfect tackle. However, he couldn't follow up as he laid on the ground while Duran regained the ball and found Mathis Tel for the lead. Kriklo wasn't faking anything, as he was taken off on a stretcher. Chelsea were enraged that the game was allowed to play on, but from Duran's perspective, he didn't even notice the English defender was still on the ground. Chelsea were already in danger with Badiashile left out of the matchday squad and Wesley Fofana not registered. Diomande is world class, no doubt about that, but his partner wasn't even a first team player, making his second appearance in the competition. Chelsea needed to survive the rest of the half, and thanks to Verbruggen making a few massive saves on Leo, the score remained the same. Entering their dressing rooms, controversy would surface from a manager's decision. Juliano was told to take the bench as he was subbed off. What was manager Ochoa's reasoning? Some suspected fitness issues because Chelsea concluded the season 6 days prior. A win was required to potentially get a Champions League spot next season. Bayern, on the other hand, had a 2-week break because of the Bundesliga's less hectic schedule. Now, who the hell is Caden Young? Not a striker. Chelsea's backup was injured, which required this lad to be pushed up. It got worse for Chelsea, as a corner not long after the restart saw Kone pushed in the box and the referee pointed to the spot. Mathis Tel made it 3, seeing a Ballon d'Or in his future. Not so fast though. Chelsea seemed out of it, yet this cross was completely missed by Lunin, as Temitope cleaned up the mess. Fast forward 10 minutes later, and Chelsea discovered the weakness. Crosses to the far post as they miraculously equalized the match. A game that seemed over with the pen back alive. Bayern's response was strong, but Verbruggen was stronger. He's been dealing with an injury all game, and unlike Lunin, he was helping his team. Moving into the last 10 minutes, and Chelsea had another cross, but Lunin actually dealt with it. Soon later, disaster struck for the Blues. Jabber, who tied the game, naively pushed Caicedo, and already on a yellow, the ref harshly gave him a second. Chelsea were down to 10, and there was time before the final whistle. This was Bayern's game to lose, but Verbruggen kept Chelsea alive. Their defense was doing their best, but in the 3rd minute of added time, Bayern maintained control of possession.
Martel takes touch with the ball, goes down the wing, finds Moth to Nacio, Caicedo to Neumeier, Neumeier strike! Neumeier wins it! Goal! Neumeier!
The creative midfielder turned out to be the crucial goal scorer, as Chelsea were out of luck and Bayern celebrated number 9. With the help of his great teammates, Leo had gotten the taste of European glory. An incredible accomplishment contrasted the other side with Juliano Mateusz. Another big final loss, but he actually did well. Unfortunately, that time on the pitch was short, leading to Ochoa being lambasted in the media. The very next day, the World Cup squad for Brazil was announced, and while most of the usual names were called up, the 3 extra spots were handed to Martinelli, Vinicius Jr., and Leo Anites. China hosted the 2034 FIFA World Cup. With 12 groups of 4, some third-place teams would qualify for the round of 32. Like 4 years ago, Brazil were handed a relatively simple group on paper. 95th ranked Trinidad and Tobago, 23rd ranked South Korea, and the winners of their previous group, 29th ranked Croatia. Brazil's ranking is 5th. There were several storylines surrounding them. How would they bounce back from their horrendous showing in Turkey? Could their momentum from the qualifiers continue? They did great in Copa America, but lost the final. Would they be able to win in the knockouts against similarly ranked nations? Forget that. Can they qualify out of their group? Plus, with the return of the 3, would there be unwanted distractions? Or will they get it together and win their first World Cup in over 30 years? Their longest spell without winning it since the tournament's founding. There were 2 friendlies prior against the 13th and 14th best countries in the world. Netherlands were drawn 1-1, while Japan were defeated 2-1. Solid results, with Martinelli grabbing headlines in each fixture. Now, who gets to number 9? Juliano. You can't take away the number from a guy who was the top scorer in Copa America and the World Cup qualifiers. Plus, his current goal rate for Brazil is better than both Pele and Romário. But can he maintain that at the world stage? As expected, Juliano earned the start versus South Korea. Joined along him was the PSG man Endrick at left wing, Atletico star Mateus Gonçalves on the right, and in the hole, it'd be Manchester United's Estevao. The 2 defensive midfielders would be Flamengo's João Gomes, pairing with Liverpool's Alexandre José. In defense, the center halves were his teammate Gilbert and Eder Militao, who is set to retire at the end of the tournament. In net, it was Luis Junior, who was labeled as world class. Lastly, the fullbacks would be Carlos Wilson of West Ham and his pal Arnaldo at the right. South Korea had threats, but on paper, this match was Brazil's to lose. We've said that before. Although, things were looking bright. A lot of shots, but 0-0 at the break. If this was 2030, doubt would creep in. But less than 5 minutes after the interval, Brazil charged forward, and with Estevao found in the middle, he slotted a ball in behind to Juliano for a first-time finish. Brazil were vibing, as Juliano would hit the bar 10 minutes later. The result was soon confirmed, as Alexandre José put in a ball to Gonçalves, who doubled the lead. A dominant performance, seeing Brazil finally win a game at the World Cup. Next up though, was to overcome this obsessive reminiscence of 2030. Compared to then, Croatia wasn't as strong. A good team overall, but they really lacked a striker to take advantage of their creativity. Brazil's lineup remained unchanged, except for Carlos Wilson, who was replaced by Barcelona defender Juninho. Croatia defeated Trinidad and Tobago prior, so this may decide first place. Although the result seemed obvious early with Estevao opening the scoring. Croatia's response was strong, however, with them hitting the post and firing at the bar. Despite that, Brazil's threat remained high, hitting the iron themselves. The advantage remained into the second half, with Brazil nearly doubling their lead. Soon they would do that. Not from Juliano, as he was subbed off in the 60th minute by Leo and Juliano. It wouldn't be him either. Instead, it was Estevao, whose dribbling couldn't be stopped as his strike was knocked in by Croatia's defender. With the clock running out, this was Croatia's closest chance, while Brazil would find a third from Loran. An emphatic win qualified Brazil for the round of 32, burying their demons. Bad news though. Estevao got injured the next day and was ruled out for the entire tournament. A rotated side was used in the concluding game versus Trinidad and Tobago. With Leo, Vinicius, and Martinelli up front, the result saw two of them score and a penalty by João Pedro cementing a 3-0 victory. 9 points, 7 different goal scorers, and 3 clean sheets. What more can you ask for? Across the World Cup, most of the groups went as expected, with a few slight upsets. The highlights were Turkey finishing above Germany, Belgium over Spain, and Japan defeating England 4-3, claiming first. That led to this round of 32 bracket. A couple favorites were matching up, while on paper, Brazil's road looked simple until the semi-finals. First up will be Poland. In the lead-up, some knockout matches happened. Initially, nothing too shocking, except for Ivory Coast's 8-1 win over Copa America winners Ecuador. For Poland, Robert Lewandowski is long gone, but Daniel Wieczorek was a promising striker who was ready to be unleashed. Brazil took its lineup from the Croatia encounter, with the sole change being Rodrigo filling in the vacant attacking mid position. They looked great, and Juliano had a big opportunity, but he hit the post. That's unlike Mateus Gonçalves. Juliano's layoff towards Endrick led to the winger being found to open the scoring. So far, the informed player for Brazil. The rest of the half was an eyesore. Come the second, Juliano would be found, and the tall striker turned and made no mistake. 2-0, and Poland fell flat. Brazil advanced to the round of 16, where they will face Japan.
Penalty for Curacao in the dying moments.
Jeff, I don't believe it!
The 82nd ranked nation are through to the last 16.
Elsewhere, Uruguay disappointed, and Mexico defeated Spain in penalties. That'll see El3 versus USA in the next round. With Curacao upsetting the odds, it was difficult to imagine them doing it again. That was until Eder Militao announced his retirement early? What are you doing, man? You're the captain, and you previously stated that you're retiring on the 24th. Not now. A few suspected drama, others questioned Eder's mentality. Whatever happened, a new captain had to be announced. Somebody who will calm things down. Juliano Mateus? That will surely work. With this reaching a tipping point, a handful of changes were made. Marquinhos believed the squad featuring the Olympic trio could do the job. He was right. Juliano grabbed a pen, Leo scored prior to the half, Martinelli earned a brace, and even Carlos Wilson contributed. 5-0 means a South American encounter with Peru. Elsewhere, Ivory Coast continued to make waves by stunning the Dutch. The 2030 hosts and finalists Turkey were defeated by Senegal. Mexico got their rivalry win over the States via penalties. Belgium got past South Korea. France destroyed Chile. And Germany did just enough to move to the next stage. Peru has rarely been a powerhouse in South America and were always dealt with under Marquinhos' reign. Performance-wise, they didn't have anyone that stood out except for Joseph Aguilar. The Toluca striker had 4 in the tournament thus far, which was more than any Brazilian. Going into the encounter, the lineup was the same as the Poland fixture. With Marquinhos' favorite team out there, it wouldn't take long before they took over. 15 minutes in, a ball to Endrick led to a near post cross, which Juliano bolted in. He matched Aguilar's tally, but the tall Brazilian wasn't finished. Before the half was reached, Peru poorly cleared the ball to Endrick, and he changed things up by delivering to the far post, where Juliano doubled the lead. His first brace of the World Cup eased any nerves. But Peru wouldn't stand by and be steamrolled. A loss of concentration from Arnaldo saw the Peruvian winger make a blindside run and was found for a tap-in. The first goal Brazil conceded at these finals. This was Peru's hope, but any sort of spark was lost when Joseph Aguilar wouldn't get up after a collision. He was forced off, and Peru couldn't find the equalizer. The World Cup semis awaited Brazil. Their opponents,
Axel Novak's best efforts don't seem to be enough. France are mere moments away from semi-final place. The Germans quickly bring it forward. Neumeier receives it. Adler now, they're giving him too much space. Christian Adler equalizes it in the dying moments. Extra time awaits. France are pushing hard for the winner. They're not wanting spot kicks to decide their future. Suarez finds Mbappe. He is taken out. The referee has pointed to the spot. Neumeier, the hero of Lisbon, has potentially cost his team a place in the semi-final.
Is last year's World Player of the Year, Mathis Tell.
He can send France to the World Cup semi-final.
Nizic stops it! Oh my goodness, I don't believe it! In dying moments, we are heading to a shootout.
3-3 heading into the fifth and potentially last round. Kone is stepping up.
Nizic stands his ground again! Ackreiner to send Germany to World Cup semi-final. And he does it! Germany, against all odds, are through!
So the semis saw Brazil versus Germany, the powerhouse country led by Manchester United striker Axel Novak. In the Premier League, a rivalry was beginning to brew between him and Juliano. Not as prolific as the Brazilian, he was still a dangerous man that knew how to win. The same could be said with the attacking midfielder behind him, Champions League winner Hans-Jörg Neumeier. It wasn't an easy task for Brazil, but they had less fatigue than the Germans. Two changes though, Martinelli in for Rodrigo and Carlos Wilson ahead of Juninho. Brazil have now been on a 22-match undefeated run, but Germany just defeated the European and previous world champions. The Germans began menacingly, creating several chances in the opening 20. The action then simmered as it remained scoreless by the break. However, in many of these fixtures, Brazil got out of the interval looking monstrous, and that happened here. A great Adler block and an even better save from Nizic kept it scoreless. Those were key, as Brazil's momentum slowed down, while Germany found small glimpses. Then, with 5 minutes before added time, Brazil wins the ball high up, leading to Juliano being fed. But then has the worst touch of his life. A baffling moment that kept it 0-0. In the last few games, Leo's name hasn't been said too often. That's because he was never subbed on ever since Juliano became captain. Vinicius, on the other hand, was trusted off the bench, as in extra time, he would hit the post. A few moments later, Brazil went on the attack again, and substitute left back Iago Ferreira was running up and delivered a ball to Juliano, who was robbed by Nizic. But Vini on the follow-up was tackled. Another Bayern player with a mistake, as Mrozek looked pale. So, Juliano, who's had a rough game, is given the chance to send Brazil to the final. The ref gives his actions, and Juliano sends Nizic the wrong way with his 6th of the tournament. Germany's response came from Neumeier, who couldn't match his Champions League moment. In similar timing to Italy versus Germany from 2006, Laurent scored late to confirm Brazil's spot in the World Cup final. A momentous accomplishment, as for the first time since 1950, a European country won't compete for the trophy. That's because on the opposite side, Mexico, who defeated Belgium, faced off with the Ivory Coast. In anticlimactic fashion, their match ended 4-0, with Mexico reaching their first World Cup final. The fortune of a country constantly losing in the early knockout rounds changed to getting grouped in 3 straight tournaments, including the one they hosted. This was unprecedented. Brazil's 6th star was expected by nearly everyone, but Mexico beat some damn good teams to get here. L3 did also have an extra day of rest too. Nevertheless, nobody came here to lose. And at a packed out Guangdong Tigers, Olympic Sports Center, history was said to be made. But would Juliano finally be on the correct side? There were impressive names in Mexico's lineup, with Luis Corona stepping up the most as the tournament kept going. For Marquinhos' side, Juninho went in for Carlos Wilson and Laurent as the attacking mid. The rest remained the same despite potential fitness problems. Juliano up top and Leo on the bench. Who's winning the FIFA World Cup? The first notable moment occurred in the 9th minute, as Arnaldo put in a great cross to Juliano, but he headed it off the bar. Mexico looked dangerous too, as around the 20th minute, Corona tested Luis Jr. After the corner was cleared for another, Mexico played it short, Corona received it, and was smashed into the ground by Arnaldo. The ref points at the spot. VAR confirms it as a recently subbed in Christian Lopez stepped up for an injured comrade. Under immense pressure, it was never in doubt. 1-0 for Mexico was unexpected, but very welcomed by many. That excitement wouldn't last long, as off a free kick, a delivery to Endrick had him pushed in the box. A penalty awarded on the other end, meaning Juliano can equalize. The captain for his 7th of the tournament is stopped. Absolute scenes as the Mexican contingent went wild. They would shut down Brazil for the remainder of the half. Juliano was dropping a stinker, and an idea dropped into Leo's brain. Get subbed on, score the equalizer, and later find the winner to lift the World Cup. Instead, he stayed on the bench, and Juliano remained on the pitch. For better or for worse, Mexico continued their danger by smacking the post a few minutes after the break. Brazil were shaky, and with less than a half hour to go, the impossible became a reality, with Luis Corona finding the second. Something needed to happen quickly for Brazil. The Olympic heroes were an idea. Vinny was subbed on, but why bring on Rodrigo, who's losing his legs? Leo remained on the bench, but Brazil had a big opportunity, only for Laurent to fail in his attempt. Laurent was the epitome of Brazil's performance, as he would miss yet another chance. These opportunities were arriving far too late, with Rodrigo hitting the post off a free kick late. Minutes turned into seconds, as in outstanding fashion, Mexico wins the 2034 FIFA World Cup. An upset of the ages, as Brazil lost consecutive international finals. Everyone was stunned. Juliano was down on the ground in tears. Teammates looking around wondering how the hell this happened. This World Cup was handed to them, but all that can be written is failure. Being Brazil's number 9 is not an easy job, but when you're handed opportunities others aren't given, you can't just do what you did. Will Brazil ever win the World Cup? A lot has happened since the catastrophe in China. How it was ranked among Brazil's worst moments is up to debate, but several players had to move forward. With Marquinhos' resignation, Zé Ricardo was appointed, Lea's old manager at Serra. He's not the most successful manager, getting relegated with a few big clubs and sacked by Boca Juniors. Hopes weren't high, especially after losing his debut match to Paraguay, who he used to manage. Nevertheless, Brazil got on track and were ready to amend themselves at Copa America 2036. An opening win versus Bolivia wasn't surprising, but a loss in Argentina was, especially with Juliano getting sent off. Still with the armband, the man hadn't done himself any favors and only kept his spot because of his goal rate. Luckily for Brazil, they moved on to the knockouts after surviving against the USA. Colombia in the quarters followed, which saw a moment of magic from Leo Anites. Forced on the wing with Juliano's return, he didn't care, as he scored quite possibly the best goal of his career. Unfortunately, a pen cancelled out the strike. The right back role is still prone to errors. From the kickoff though, Alexandre José did brilliantly to find Juliano, and he brought Brazil back into the lead. Returning to the good books for now, that was the winner. In the semi-final, it was Mexico. Enjoying their celebration tour around South America, revenge was on the mind. Maybe they should focus on winning, trailing 1-0 within minutes. However, focus returned as a team locked in and demolished El3 5-1. Returning to the Copa America final, their biggest rivals Argentina would be in their way. In Uruguay though, redemption arrived from Juliano Mateus, who in the 15th minute scored the lone goal as Brazil finally wins an international tournament. 17 years since the last trophy, and Juliano got his moment. This was a turning point in his career. He became the captain of Chelsea and continued to climb the club's top goal scorer chart with consistent 20-goal seasons. That resulted in multiple runner-up awards in the European Golden Shoe. He even won the Ballon d'Or. Trophies-wise, nothing matched Copa America, as Chelsea's only cup would be in the 2038 Europa League. They defeated Manchester United in penalties, with him scoring in the shootout. Unfortunately for him, there was still one Premier League match. Despite a Champions League spot being earned, he played, and in the 58th minute, he suddenly stopped running as he tore his hamstring. 18 days before the World Cup, he was out. Juliano wouldn't be Brazil's number 9. The 2038 World Cup returned to South Africa, and Brazil's starting striker and number 9 would be Leo Anites. With a group of Panama, Nigeria, and Scotland, Leo scored 6 in what was a bright start to the tournament. Over the past 4 years, he and Mathis Tel continued to win Bundesligas, score a ton of goals, and be nominated for awards. Leo never won anything major, unlike Tel, who won the 2034 Ballon d'Or and the 2036 World Player of the Year. However, Tel eventually left and moved to Saudi Arabia. Leo, on the other hand, is still at Bayern and is considered a legend at the club. Returning to the World Cup, the knockouts were a cruise for Brazil. Leo wasn't needed as much, but 5-2 over Turkey and 5-0 past Colombia led to a quarter-final encounter with Scotland. Defeated earlier in the tournament, one of Leo's worst moments was against the Scots, where they lost in shocking fashion. With a record of 1-1 and a spot to the semi-finals on the line, something special needed to happen. Leo provided that with an incredible free kick. Unfortunately for Brazil, that wasn't the defining moment, with an own goal causing extra time. That delayed the inevitable, as they won it by the end, moving on to the semi-final, where they faced France. It was Leo versus Mathis Tel. Looks like he won numero 9, although he already has his World Cup. Regardless, neither were the heroes. Instead, this early banger was enough to send Brazil back to the World Cup final. In the final, Brazil would face Italy. They defeated the previous World Cup champions Mexico in the round of 16, returning to tradition, and the Euro 2036 winners Spain in the semis. So, it was a rematch of the 1994 final, which ended tragically for the Italians. At the former Soccer City Stadium in Johannesburg, Leo was given the start for the final. All these years of successes and failures, some in his control, others not, he and his teammates can end Brazil's 36-year drought, but the Italians will want to end their 32-year drought. It began early with Alexandre José finding his teammate at the back post. A genius pass from a genius midfielder. Italy would respond in the 22nd minute as Christian Stongoni made Brazil wish Carlos Wilson was still in his prime as he breezed past their fullback to equalize. It was going better than 4 years ago, but losing the lead wasn't ideal. However, for Leo, it just meant there was time for him to score the game winner. Still in the first half, Stongoni gives it away as Brazil counters to the wing and Emerson finds Leo in the middle. Of course, he wouldn't miss it. Brazil was 45 minutes away from glory. Roughly 10 minutes after the interval, Italy would make another silly mistake, and that led to Ale touching it into the box and finding the third. Brazil would close this out and clinch their 6th World Cup. Prior to the trophy being lifted, awards were given. Leo with 9 goals won the silver shoe, since this American lad scored 7 versus Indonesia. However, that wasn't it, as the golden ball was of course awarded to Leo Anites, the best player of the tournament and a World Cup winner. The trophy was raised by Captain Jobert, and the squad would be partying until the early morning in South Africa and all the way back home. Heroes of a new generation. And it was Leo Anites, who was Brazil's number 9.